The desert winds of Colchis carry more than sand. They carry whispers of gods both dead and living, prayers spoken in languages forgotten by the wider galaxy, the weight of belief that has shaped this world for millennia uncounted. Beneath twin suns that bleach bone white and turn stone to glass, the cities rise in defiance of the wasteland. Their spires reach toward heavens that seem closer here than on other worlds, as if the barrier between reality and something beyond grows thin in this barren place. The Covenant rules here, an ancient theocracy whose priests claim lineage stretching back to humanity's first days among the stars. Their temples dominate every settlement. Their rituals mark every hour of every day. Their words carry the force of absolute law. The people of Colchis do not question this. They cannot imagine existence without the Covenant structure, without the certainty that comes from knowing one's place in a cosmos ordered by divine will. Faith is not simply belief here. It is the foundation upon which all civilization rests. Within the Cathedral of Illumination, the grandest temple on all of Colchis, the hierarchs of the Covenant gather for their sacred duties. Incense smoke rises through shafts of filtered sunlight, creating pillars of haze that seem to support the vaulted ceiling. The chanting of devotional hymns echoes from alcoves where lesser priests maintain their vigil. This is the heart of Colchisian faith, the place where the relationship between mortal and divine finds its purest expression. Here, power flows not from military might or technological advantage, but from the ability to interpret the will of gods. The Covenant teaches that four divine powers watch over humanity. The Old Faith, as it is called, speaks of entities dwelling beyond mortal comprehension, beings of such vast power that they shape reality through their mere existence. The priests guard this knowledge jealously, revealing its mysteries only to those deemed worthy. They speak in careful metaphors and veiled references, knowing that some truths burn those unprepared to receive them. The faithful accept what they are given, trust in the wisdom of those who stand between them and the infinite. But the Covenant itself has grown corrupt over the long centuries. What began as genuine spiritual seeking has calcified into political maneuvering. The hierarchs care more for their privileges than for the truths they supposedly serve. They use faith as a tool of control, invoking divine will to justify their earthly appetites. The common people suffer under this system, their devotion exploited, their faith weaponized against them. Yet they endure because they know no alternative, because the structure of belief holds even when those administering it have lost their way. Into this world of sand and faith and corruption, something extraordinary arrives. The infant falls from the sky in a capsule that leaves a crater in the desert floor. Local tribesmen discover him, this golden-skinned child who radiates an otherworldly presence. They bring him to the Covenant, uncertain what else to do with a being so clearly touched by powers beyond their understanding. The priests gather around the infant, seeing in him the fulfillment of ancient prophecies, the return of the divine to the mortal realm. One priest in particular claims the child, Cor Farron, a man whose devotion to the old faith runs deeper than his brethren suspect. He sees in this infant not merely a prophesied savior, but an opportunity. The child grows with impossible speed, his intellect developing at a pace that defies natural law. Within months he speaks with the eloquence of a trained orator. Within a year, he reads and comprehends texts that take scholars decades to master. This is no ordinary foundling. This is something crafted by forces beyond Colchisian understanding. Corferin names him Lorgar, the Golden One. He raises the boy within the Cathedral of Illumination, ensuring his education proceeds according to careful design. The priest teaches young Lorgar all the sacred texts, all the rituals and observances, all the hidden knowledge of the old faith. But Corferin's instruction carries a subtle poison. He emphasizes the reality of the divine powers, their hunger for worship, their willingness to reward those who serve them. He plants seeds that will grow in directions the priest cannot yet imagine. Young Lorgar absorbs everything with the desperate hunger of a being crafted for purpose. He reads every text in the cathedral's vast library, memorizing their contents with a single pass through their pages. He questions the priests who teach him, pushing past their comfortable certainties to reach for deeper understanding. Most find his intensity disturbing, this child who seems to look through them rather than at them. But Corferin encourages it, seeing in Lorgar's obsessive seeking the key to his own ambitions. The child begins preaching before he reaches his 10th year. His sermons draw crowds who recognize in his words something they have never heard before: genuine passion, true belief. Lorgar speaks of the divine not as distant abstractions, but as living presences who care about the fate of humanity. He describes a cosmos ordered by meaning rather than chaos, a universe where faith serves as the bridge between mortal limitation and transcendent power. Those who hear him feel something stir in their hearts, a response to certainty, delivered with such conviction that doubt becomes impossible. The hierarchs of the Covenant grow concerned. This golden child threatens their comfortable monopoly on religious authority. His charisma makes their carefully practiced oratory seem hollow by comparison. Worse, he questions their interpretation of the sacred texts, pointing out contradictions and suggesting alternative readings that undermine their privileged position. They begin plotting against him, seeking ways to remove this threat while maintaining their grip on power. But Lorgar's following grows faster than they can suppress it. He speaks of a coming god, a supreme being who will arrive on Colchis to lead humanity into a new age. His visions show him a mighty warrior in gleaming bronze armor, a one-eyed giant in blue robes standing beside him. These prophecies spread through the population, creating an expectation that divides the faithful. Some cling to the Covenant's traditional teachings. Others look to Lorgar's promised future with a hope that burns like fever. The schism erupts into violence. Lorgar's followers, calling themselves the Godsworn, clash with adherents of the old hierarchy. What begins as doctrinal disputes escalates into armed conflict. The streets of Colchisian cities run red as neighbor turns against neighbor, all claiming divine sanction for their actions. Corferin stands at Lorgar's side throughout, no longer simply a priest, but a military commander leading the Godsworn in holy war. Lorgar himself remains strangely detached from the carnage conducted in his name. He watches the violence with sorrow, mourning every death even as he insists the purge is necessary. He speaks of building a better world, a unified Colchis, where all may worship freely. But to reach that future requires destroying the old order, eliminating those too corrupted to accept change. The contradiction tears at him, this being who craves peace yet presides over slaughter. The wars rage for years. Cities burn as the Godsworn advance. their army swelled by converts who see in Lorgar's certainty an anchor in a universe suddenly revealed as unstable. The old covenant fights back with desperation, knowing that defeat means not merely loss of power, but erasure of everything they represent. They fight for their gods, unaware that the entities they serve care nothing for their individual fates. Lorgar leads the final assault on the Cathedral of Illumination himself. The Golden Youth, now grown to towering stature, strides through halls where he once studied as a child. His followers spread through the sacred spaces, pulling down ancient symbols and destroying texts that contradict their new faith. The hierarchs make their last stand in the innermost sanctum, surrounded by relics they believe will protect them. They are wrong. The slaughter is thorough. When Lorgar emerges from the cathedral, no member of the old hierarchy lives. He stands in the doorway, his pristine robe somehow unstained despite the carnage behind him, and proclaims that Colchis has been purified. The people look to him with a mixture of adoration and terror, uncertain what this golden prophet will demand of them now. Corferon orchestrates what comes next. The first purge, as it will later be known, sweeps across Colchis like a cleansing fire. The godsworn hunt down any who might challenge Lorgar's authority, any who cling to interpretations of faith that contradict his vision. 1/3 of Colchis's population falls to the purge. Their bodies fill mass graves that will be discovered millennia hence, testament to the price of religious certainty. Through it all, Lorgar writes. He pours his thoughts into scrolls and codices, creating a body of theological work that will shape the future in ways he cannot imagine. He refines the Covenant's teachings, stripping away political corruption to reveal what he believes is the pure truth beneath. He describes the coming God in terms that blend reverence with expectation of personal relationship. He creates rituals designed to demonstrate proper devotion, to show the divine that humanity understands its place in the cosmic order. Colchis emerges from its civil wars transformed. A single faith unites the people now, their devotion channeled through Lorgar's interpretation of the divine. Cities rebuild, more magnificent than before, their architecture designed to inspire awe. The population grows prosperous under carefully structured social systems that emphasize each person's spiritual as well as practical role. This is Lorgar's vision, made manifest, a world ordered by faith, where every action carries theological significance. And then the sky opens. Ships of a scale Colchis has never witnessed descend through the atmosphere, their hulls bearing symbols that match nothing in Colchisian records. Landing craft settle on the desert floor near the rebuilt Cathedral of Illumination. Ramps lower, revealing figures in gleaming bronze armor, their forms towering and terrible. At their head walks a being of such overwhelming presence that reality seems to bend around him. Lorgar stands before the cathedral, waiting. He knows who this must be. The visions that have haunted him since childhood finally made flesh. The Emperor of Mankind has come to Colchis. The god Lorgar has been expecting. The divine being his entire faith has prepared for, steps onto the sand of his homeworld. This moment, this meeting between Primarch and Creator, will echo through millennia. But already, in ways neither can perceive, things are beginning to go wrong. Corferon watches from the shadows, his thoughts turning to the old faith he never truly abandoned. The Emperor looks upon Lorgar's works with an expression that is not quite approval. And in the space between what the Primarch hopes and what his father intends, a chasm opens that will swallow entire civilizations. The desert winds continue to blow, carrying whispers, carrying prophecies, carrying the seeds of a corruption that will transform belief into betrayal and faith into the most dangerous weapon the galaxy has ever known. The 17th Legion has fought for decades without their Gene Father. They bear the designation Imperial Heralds, a title that speaks to their original purpose. Before each compliance action, a single herald delivers the Emperor's ultimatum to the recalcitrant world: submit or face annihilation. The response determines what follows. Acceptance brings swift integration into the growing Imperium. Refusal brings the full weight of transhuman wrath. These early word-bearers distinguish themselves through methodical brutality. When a world chooses defiance, they do not simply conquer, they eradicate. Every temple falls, every idol smashed, every sacred text burned. They call themselves iconoclasts in these years, a name earned through their zealous destruction of anything smacking of religion or superstition. The imperial truth demands humanity abandon the crutch of faith, acknowledge that only material reality deserves consideration. The heralds enforce this with bolter and blade. Their recruitment draws from the sons of defeated enemies, children taken from conquered worlds, raised to understand the crimes of their fathers, taught that service to the Legion represents redemption for bloodlines stained by resistance. This creates warriors who fight with particular intensity, driven by need to prove themselves worthy, to wash away the shame of their origins. They approach each campaign with grim determination, knowing that failure reflects not merely on themselves, but on their entire histories. Yet despite their efficiency, something seems absent. Other legions develop distinctive character through campaigns. The Ultramarines perfect their strategic doctrine. The Lunar Wolves forge brotherhood through shared victory. The Blood Angels discover nobility in violence, but the Heralds remain curiously undefined, as if waiting for something to give them shape. Their chaplains notice this, these specialized warriors tasked with maintaining Legion morale. They see in their brothers' eyes a hunger that conquest cannot satisfy, a yearning for purpose beyond simple compliance. The chaplaincy itself represents the Legion's most unique feature. While other legions assign such roles as administrative necessity, the heralds elevate their chaplains to positions of genuine spiritual authority. These warriors do not merely monitor morale, they shape belief itself, or attempt to, channeling their brothers' intensity toward the imperial truth. But the truth feels thin, inadequate to contain the passions burning in transhuman hearts. The chaplains struggle with this, sensing their failure even as they proclaim orthodox doctrine. Then comes the summons to Colchis. The Emperor himself leads the expedition to this desert world on the galaxy's edge. The heralds accompany their creator, uncertain what to expect. Rumors have spread of a Primarch discovered, one of the lost Gene Fathers scattered during the ancient catastrophe. The Legion prepares to meet the being whose genetic legacy flows through their veins, whose presence will complete them in ways they cannot articulate. The reunion transforms everything. Lorgar stands before his sons for the first time, this golden prophet whose faith has unified an entire world. The heralds look upon him and feel something shift in their souls, recognition beyond simple genetic kinship. This is the missing piece, the element their legion has lacked. Not merely a commander, but a purpose. Lorgar embodies meaning itself, his very presence radiating the certainty they have craved since their creation. The Emperor observes this meeting with calculated attention. He sees in Lorgar both promise and peril. This son has demonstrated remarkable gifts of oratory and organization, transforming primitive Colchis into a functioning civilization. But he has done so through religious fervor, channeling devotion toward transcendent powers. The Emperor knows such tendencies must be redirected, or they will undermine everything the Imperium represents. He decides to take the risk, to see if Lorgar's passion can be harnessed for secular purposes. Lorgar renames his legion. The Imperial heralds become the word bearers, a designation that captures their new purpose. They will spread not just compliance but understanding, bringing the Emperor's vision to ignorant populations through careful teaching. Their conquests will be complete, transforming not merely governance but culture itself. Lorgar envisions worlds remade in the Imperium's image, populations uplifted from superstition into enlightenment. But beneath the surface, something else takes root. Lorgar misunderstands his father's nature in a fundamental way. He looks upon the Emperor and sees divinity confirmed. This being of impossible power, who created the Primarchs and commands the stars themselves. How could he be anything but a god? The visions that led Lorgar to predict his father's coming, how could they emerge from anything less than divine providence? The faith that unified Colchis demands an object worthy of worship. In the Emperor, Lorgar finds what he has been seeking his entire life. The Emperor forbids this explicitly. During the celebrations on Colchis, as crowds gather to worship their returned god, he makes his position clear. He is not divine. He is simply the most advanced example of human evolution, the product of ancient genetic engineering and accumulated knowledge. To worship him perpetuates the ignorance the Imperium fights to eliminate. Lorgar appears to accept this, outwardly conforming to his father's wishes. But in his heart, he cannot believe what the Emperor says. The word-bearers join the Great Crusade with ferocious enthusiasm. They throw themselves into compliance, actions with an intensity that disturbs their cousins in other legions. But their approach differs from the methodical brutality of their herald days. Now they seek not just to conquer, but to convert. They arrive on each world not as destroyers, but as liberators, bringing news of humanity's manifest destiny among the stars. Their chaplains preach the Emperor's glory, describing his achievements in terms that blur the line between exceptional ability and supernatural power. Lorgar oversees the construction of vast monuments on newly compliant worlds. Cathedrals rise on planets that knew only rubble, their architecture designed to inspire awe. Statues of the Emperor dominate public squares, his image rendered in materials that will survive millennia. Libraries fill with texts describing his victories, his wisdom, his benevolent rule over humanity's greatest civilization. The Primarch personally authors many of these works, his eloquence crafting narratives that elevate his father to mythic status. The Lectitio Divinitatus represents Lorgar's masterwork. This comprehensive theological text argues for the Emperor's divinity through careful logic and passionate conviction. It describes the evidence of his supernatural nature, the miracles witnessed during the Unification Wars, the impossible feats that mark him as something more than mortal. It provides structure for worship, rituals designed to demonstrate proper devotion, hierarchies of religious authority that will guide the faithful. Lorgar believes he is creating the foundation for humanity's spiritual renaissance, giving people the framework they need to understand their God's true nature. The text spreads across compliant worlds like wildfire. Despite the Emperor's prohibition on religion, populations embrace this new faith with desperate hunger. They have been told that gods do not exist, that their traditional beliefs represent ignorance and weakness. But here comes a text that validates their spiritual yearning, that points to a being demonstrably deserving of worship. The Lectitio Divinitatus offers meaning in a cosmos the imperial truth has rendered cold and hostile. Millions convert, finding in emperor worship the anchor they thought lost forever. The word-bearer's pace of conquest slows dramatically. Lorgar insists on complete cultural transformation before moving to the next target. His legion plants seeds of faith on each world, establishing priesthoods and sacred spaces, ensuring the Lectitio Divinitatus takes root in local populations. Months stretch into years as the word-bearers perfect their work, building civilizations that will worship the Emperor long after the Legion has departed. Their compliance tallies lag behind other legions, but Lorgar considers this acceptable. Quality matters more than quantity in the construction of paradise. Monarchia becomes the crown jewel of Lorgar's vision. This world receives the full attention of the word-bearers for over a decade. They tear down existing structures and rebuild according to perfect geometric principles, creating a city that stands as testament to humanity's potential when guided by faith. The architecture channels worshippers toward contemplation, every angle and proportion calculated to inspire devotion. Cathedrals rise at key positions, their bells marking the hours with sacred significance. The population adopts rituals that sanctify every moment, from waking to sleeping, all oriented toward the Emperor's glory. The perfect city, they call it. Monarchia the pure. Citizens walk streets unmarred by crime or conflict, their lives ordered by the structure faith provides. They gather in the cathedrals for daily sermons, their voices raised in hymns that echo across the cityscape. Missionaries spread from Monarchia to neighboring systems, carrying the Lectitio Divinitatis and the certainty that comes from complete submission to divine will. This is everything Lorgar hoped to achieve, civilization perfected through worship. But far away, on distant terra, reports accumulate. Questioners and remembrancers send back detailed observations of worlds brought to compliance by the word-bearers. They describe the cathedrals, the rituals, the open worship that violates the Emperor's most fundamental decrees. They note the slow pace of the 17th Legion's conquests, the resources poured into building monuments rather than conquering new territories. They express concern about teachings that directly contradict the imperial truth, wonder how such deviation has been allowed to continue for so long. The Emperor reads these reports with growing anger. He has allowed Lorgar considerable freedom, hoping the Primarch would redirect his religious tendencies towards secular purposes. Instead, Lorgar has doubled down, creating a cult of worship that spreads across compliant space. The Lectitio Divinitatus undermines everything the Imperium stands for, threatens to drag humanity back into the superstitious darkness from which it has only recently emerged. This cannot continue. Decisive action becomes necessary. The decision reaches Monarchia first. An entire expeditionary fleet translates into the system, its vessels bearing the blue and gold of the Ultramarines Legion. The 13th approaches the perfect city, not as visitors, but as executioners. Their orders come directly from the Emperor, carried by Malcador the Sigillite, and enforced by a full complement of Legio Custodes. Monarchia must fall, and fall completely, leaving no stone standing upon another. The evacuation proceeds with ruthless efficiency. Ultramarines move through the city in precise patterns, clearing each district methodically. Citizens receive hours to gather what they can carry, nothing more. Many refuse, unable to comprehend why they must abandon the holy places they have created. The Ultramarines remove them forcibly, carrying the resistant bodily from their homes. No violence is used against the population, but neither is mercy shown toward their pleas. The bombardment begins at dawn. Lance strikes from orbit carve through golden domes and proud spires. The cathedrals that took years to build collapse in seconds, their carefully designed acoustics amplifying the sound of their own destruction. Precision munitions reduce monuments to rubble, statues of the Emperor toppling to shatter on streets suddenly filled with debris. The Ultramarines on the ground move through the ruins with flamers and melter charges, ensuring nothing remains that could be reconstructed, nothing that might preserve even a fragment of what Monarchia represented. By nightfall, the perfect city exists only in memory. Where magnificent structures once stood, only ash and broken stone remain. The evacuated citizens huddle in camps beyond the destruction, watching smoke rise from the ruin of everything they believed sacred. Some weep, some pray. Some simply stand in silence, their minds unable to process the magnitude of loss. The Emperor has spoken, and his word is annihilation. Word reaches the word-bearers, a summons to gather. Every warrior of the 17th Legion ordered to assemble at Kur. No explanation accompanies the command, but none is needed. Every brother feels the psychic pressure building, the sense of approaching judgment. Their Primarch goes silent, retreating into his quarters as the Legion responds to the summons. Lorgar knows what awaits him, has seen it in nightmares that plague his sleep. The confrontation he has dreaded since first hearing his father forbid worship. 100,000 word-bearers gather on the ash plain that was Monarchia. They stand in perfect formation, crimson armor gleaming in the harsh sunlight, weapons held in ceremonial posture. Around them, the Ultramarines form a ring, bolters held ready, an implicit threat in their positioning. This is not an honor guard. This is containment. The word-bearers are being treated not as loyal sons, but as potential threats, surrounded and prepared for execution if necessary. The Emperor's vessel descends through the atmosphere, its golden hull reflecting light like a second sun. The ramp lowers, revealing the master of mankind himself, accompanied by Robut Guilliman, Malcador, and a full complement of custodian guard. The Emperor's presence hammers against the assembled word-bearers like physical pressure, forcing their heads down involuntarily. Even transhuman warriors cannot stand straight before this much focused will. Lorgar stands at the head of his legion, still upright through sheer determination. He looks upon his father, this being he has worshipped since childhood, and sees no warmth in that golden gaze. Only disappointment, only anger. The Primarch, who has built his entire existence around devotion to this god, confronts the reality that his worship has been rejected, condemned, erased from the surface of a world with as much care as one might sterilize a wound. The Emperor speaks, and his words carry the weight of absolute judgment. He describes the word-bearers' failure, their violation of the imperial truth, their slow pace of conquest, while building monuments to a divinity he has explicitly disavowed. He makes clear that the 17th Legion's entire approach represents betrayal of the Great Crusade's fundamental purpose. They have not brought enlightenment, but perpetuated the ignorance they were meant to destroy. Their beautiful cities are prisons built from superstition, their converts merely slaves to a different delusion. The psychic command crashes down like a hammer blow. 100,000 word-bearers are driven to their knees in the ashes of their greatest achievement. No resistance is possible. The Emperor's will forces them down, crushing Primarch and Battle Brother alike into supplication before the ruins of the perfect city. This is more than physical humiliation. This is spiritual annihilation, the explicit rejection of everything they have believed, everything they have built, everything they have been. Lorgar kneels at the head of his legion, tears cutting tracks through the ash coating his face. The being he has worshipped as a god has condemned his worship as crime. The Father, whose divinity seemed self-evident, has declared the very belief to be error. Everything Lorgar has written, every sermon he has preached, every cathedral he has built, all rejected, all wrong, all destroyed with as much consideration as the Emperor might give to eliminating a particularly stubborn Xenos infestation. The Emperor delivers his final command. The word-bearers will rededicate themselves to the true purpose of the Great Crusade. They will abandon religious practices entirely, embrace the imperial truth without reservation or modification. They will match the conquest pace of other legions, bringing worlds into compliance through military action rather than cultural transformation. If they fail to do so, if they slip back into the patterns that have been condemned this day, the 17th Legion will be erased from history as thoroughly as Monarchia has been erased from Kur's surface. The Emperor departs, leaving his son and the 17th Legion kneeling in the ashes. The Ultramarines withdraw to their vessels, their duty complete, taking with them the custodians who will henceforth monitor the word-bearers for any sign of backsliding. The psycho pressure releases, allowing the humiliated legion to rise on trembling limbs. They stand in the ruins of everything they believed, surrounded by the ashes of their faith, and feel the terrible emptiness that comes from certainty destroyed. Lorgar remains kneeling long after his father has departed. His mind struggles to process the magnitude of this rejection. The god he has worshipped his entire life has declared himself no god at all. The faith that brought unity to Colchis, that created wonders on 100 worlds, that gave meaning to existence itself, condemned as ignorance, eliminated as error. What is left when the foundation of reality is revealed as false? Where does one turn when the object of worship rejects that worship as crime? The desert winds blow across the ash plain, carrying the soot that was once the perfect city, carrying the broken prayers of a shattered legion. And in the silence that follows devastation, in the void left by faith destroyed, other voices begin to whisper. Older voices, darker voices, voices that do not reject worship but welcome it, that do not condemn devotion but demand it, that offer truths the Emperor has forbidden because he knows they will destroy everything he has built. Lorgar rises from the ashes, a changed being. The light in his eyes has gone dark, replaced by something harder and colder. He looks upon his humiliated sons, and sees his own pain reflected in their faces. He understands now that the Emperor has committed the ultimate betrayal, not rejecting faith itself, but commanding faith suppression while embodying every quality that makes a being worthy of worship, forcing his sons to deny what they can see with their own eyes, what they feel in their very gene-coded souls. The word-bearers depart Kur in silence. They return to their vessels, these warriors who have been broken and remade in a single day. They do not speak of what has happened. They do not process their humiliation through the usual channels of brotherhood and shared experience. Instead, they retreat into themselves, each warrior grappling privately with the destruction of everything they believed sacred. Only Corfaran and Erebus remain by Lorgar's side. These two, the foster father and the first chaplain, who have shaped the Primarch's faith from the beginning. They speak to him in his darkest hours, when doubt threatens to consume him entirely. They offer comfort through questions rather than answers. If the Emperor is not divine, what is he? If faith must be suppressed, where lies meaning in a cold and purposeless cosmos? If the being who created the Primarchs rejects worship, what does that reveal about his true nature and intentions? And in the darkest watches of the night, when Lorgar sits alone surrounded by the ruins of his convictions, other voices join the whispers. Voices that have been waiting for this moment, preparing for this vulnerability. Voices that speak of powers beyond the Emperor's control, entities older and greater than any mortal or Primarch, or even the master of mankind himself. Voices that offer not rejection but acceptance, not condemnation but embrace. The word-bearers begin to change in ways their observers do not immediately recognize. They redouble their efforts in the Great Crusade, conquering worlds at a pace that satisfies even the most demanding oversight. Their conquest tallies climb, surpassing previous records, proving their dedication to the Emperor's vision. But those who look closely might notice subtle differences in their approach. The particular thoroughness with which they eliminate local populations, the strange markings left on subjugated worlds, the way survivors describe their conquerors, speaking of transhuman warriors who no longer seem entirely human. Lorgar retreats into his studies, seeking answers in texts the Emperor has forbidden. He investigates the old faith of Colchis, those teachings Corfaran claimed to have abandoned, but which suddenly seem relevant again. He corresponds with Magnus the Red, his psychically gifted brother, seeking understanding of forces that exist beyond material reality. He questions everything he has been taught, everything he has believed, searching for truth in a universe suddenly revealed as far stranger and more dangerous than he imagined. The pilgrimage of the serrated sun begins in secret. A single chapter of word-bearers, chosen for their receptivity to new truths, departs the main fleet on a mission known only to Lorgar's inner circle. Their official purpose is routine exploration at the galaxy's edge. Their actual destination lies in a direction the Imperium has declared forbidden, toward a region where the barriers between reality and something else grow dangerously thin. They go seeking gods, these warriors whose faith has been destroyed, hoping to find powers worthy of the worship their father has rejected. Behind them, the rest of the word-bearers continue their apparently loyal conquest of the galaxy. None suspect that beneath the surface, a transformation has begun that will make Monarchia's destruction seem like a mercy. None realize that in shattering Lorgar's faith, the Emperor has created something far more dangerous than a religious zealot. He has created a seeker after truth who will not stop until he finds it, no matter how terrible that truth proves to be, no matter what darkness he must embrace to satisfy the hunger that now consumes him. The desert winds of Kur continue to blow across the ash plain. They carry whispers still, but the whispers are changing, taking on tones that would freeze the blood of any who truly understood their source. The gods are calling to Lorgar now, and in his desperation and pain and hunger for meaning, he is beginning to listen. The Serrated Sun chapter departs from the main word-bearer's fleet with minimal ceremony. 1,000 warriors board their vessels, their armor still bearing the scars of recent campaigns, their weapons consecrated according to old rituals that now carry different meaning. Chapter Master Argyltal leads them, this warrior chosen not merely for martial prowess, but for spiritual receptivity. He carries questions that cannot be voiced in the presence of imperial observers, doubts that have festered since Monarchia's ashes settled into Kur's soil. Corfaran commands the expedition officially. The Master of the Faith maintains his facade of absolute loyalty while guiding the chapter toward destinations no imperial fleet would willingly approach. He has studied ancient charts, texts older than the Imperium itself, fragments of knowledge preserved from humanity's first expansion into the void. These sources speak of regions where reality grows thin, where the barriers between the material universe and something else become permeable. The Cadia system lies at the edge of one such region. 5 custodians accompany the expedition. These golden warriors represent the Emperor's watchful eye, assigned to ensure the word-bearers do not backslide into the religious practices that earned Monarchia's fate. They observe everything, their transhuman senses attuned to the slightest deviation from orthodoxy. Their presence complicates Corfaran's plans, but he has accounted for this. The pilgrimage must seem routine, a simple compliance action at the galaxy's edge, until the moment revelation becomes impossible to suppress. The warp journey carries them toward the galactic rim, into regions where imperial cartography grows sparse and uncertain. The navigators report unusual turbulence, currents in the immaterium that follow no predictable pattern. Ships of the fleet sometimes lose contact with one another for subjective weeks, only to find themselves still in perfect formation when they return to normal perception. Time flows strangely here, pooling and eddying around obstacles that exist in no dimension the materially minded can comprehend. Argyltal feels the changes first. Something in his gene seed responds to proximity to the great warp rift ahead, ancient coding left by his Primarch stirring in response to stimuli it was designed to recognize. He experiences dreams that are not dreams, visions that intrude on waking consciousness with increasing frequency. He sees cities built from screaming stone, oceans that burn without consuming themselves, skies colored in shades that have no name, because mortal eyes were never meant to perceive them. The other word-bearers report similar experiences. Their chaplains, trained to monitor spiritual well-being, note the changes with concern and fascination intermingled. This is what Lorgar sent them to find, these visions that suggest realities beyond the Emperor's narrow truths. Yet the implications disturb even those most eager for answers. If these visions represent genuine glimpses of something real, what does that say about the universe they thought they understood? The custodians grow increasingly suspicious. They recognize the signs of warp corruption, have been trained since inception to detect such taint. They begin restricting their movements through the fleet, traveling only in groups, maintaining constant vigilance. Aquilon, their leader, voices his concerns to Corferan directly. This expedition should be aborted. The fleet returned to known space for purification rituals and genetic screening. The Master of the Faith deflects these demands with political skill, citing the Emperor's direct orders to continue the Great Crusade, invoking the need to investigate all potential threats before they can metastasize. The Cadia system appears on their sensors like a wound in reality. The planet itself orbits a stable star, its environment suitable for human habitation. But something about this world feels wrong in ways instruments cannot measure. The astropaths assigned to the fleet refuse to look in Cadia's direction, claiming that voices speak to them from the world below, calling them by names they have never shared, promising revelations that would shatter their sanity. As the fleet enters orbit, the crew of every vessel experiences the same phenomenon. The great warp storm visible at the edge of the system seems to pulse with their heartbeats, its terrible energies synchronized to biological rhythms no storm should perceive. Later ages will call this rift the Eye of Terror, will build fortress worlds to guard against its malevolence. But now, in this moment before humanity understands what it faces, the storm is simply beautiful in its awful majesty, a rent in the sky through which realities bleed together. The population of Cadia appears primitive on initial scans. No cities of significant size, no industrial infrastructure, technology barely beyond what humanity possessed before the Age of Strife. Yet something about their settlements follows patterns that suggest deeper sophistication. Geometric arrangements that echo forms found in text the word bearers have studied, symbols that resonate with meanings their chaplains half remember from Colchisian lore. The landing party assembles with careful selection. Argyltal and his most trusted warriors, backed by elements of the Imperial Army and several Legio Cybernetica war constructs. The custodians insist on accompanying the expedition in full force, their distrust now barely concealed. Corferan agrees with apparent reluctance, understanding that the next phase requires their presence, their witnessing of truths that will shatter the lies they serve. The Cadians greet them without fear. These purple-eyed natives approach the descending shuttles with expressions of recognition rather than terror. They do not prostrate themselves before the towering transhuman warriors or flee from the mechanical monstrosities that accompany them. Instead, they welcome the expedition as if its arrival fulfills prophecy, as if this meeting has been ordained by powers that transcend chance or coincidence. A woman steps forward from the gathered natives. She carries herself with authority that belies her simple garments, speaks with eloquence that seems impossible given Cadia's primitive condition. She addresses Corferan by name and title, information she should not possess, knowledge that could only come from sources beyond normal human capacity. The custodian Aquilon moves to execute her immediately, recognizing obvious signs of warp taint. But the word-bearers intervene, their warriors forming a wall between the custodians and the Cadians. The woman introduces herself as Ingethel. She speaks of the old gods, powers that existed before humanity climbed down from its first trees, entities that shaped the galaxy's evolution through their mere existence. She describes Colchis and the Covenant, references events from Lorgar's childhood that no outsider could know, demonstrates understanding of the word-bearer's spiritual crisis that seems to bypass normal channels of information. Every word she speaks carries multiple meanings, layers of significance that unfold in the minds of those listening. She offers to show them the truth, not the Emperor's truth, not the narrow materialism that denies half the cosmos its due, but the primordial truth, the fundamental reality that underlies both material and immaterial existence. She speaks of gods who welcome worship rather than forbid it, powers that offer partnership to those brave enough to acknowledge their reality. She promises that the word-bearers will find what they seek, that their faith will be validated in ways that exceed their comprehension. Kor Farron accepts immediately. This is why they came, why Lorgar sent them into the darkness beyond known space. The custodians protest violently, demanding the woman's immediate execution and the expedition's return to orbit. But they are 5 warriors against 1,000 word-bearers, and their authority carries weight only so long as the 17th Legion chooses to acknowledge it. That choice, made in this moment, represents the first open break between the Emperor's vision and the path Lorgar has chosen. Ingerthal leads them to sacred sites scattered across Cadia's surface, stone circles that predate human settlement, their arrangement matching stellar alignments no primitive culture should perceive. Caverns where the rock itself seems to breathe, expanding and contracting in rhythm with invisible tides. Groves where vegetation grows in fractal patterns that hurt to observe directly, their geometry suggesting dimensions mortal minds strain to process. At each location, she shares pieces of knowledge that connect like puzzle fragments, building toward understanding too vast for single revelation. She speaks of the chaos, gods by name now no longer disguising their nature behind metaphor and careful phrasing. Khorne, the blood god, whose rage powers every violent impulse across the galaxy. Tzeentch, the changer of ways, whose schemes encompass millennia and whose manipulations shape the flow of history itself. Nurgle, the plague father, whose gifts of disease and decay represent the inevitability of entropy given divine form. Slanesh, the Dark Prince, youngest of the 4, whose birth screams still echo through the warped millennia. After its emergence, the word-bearers listen with growing hunger. This is what they have been seeking without knowing how to name it. Validation that the spiritual realm exists despite the Emperor's denials. These powers represent everything their father has forbidden them to acknowledge, everything the imperial truth declares impossible. Yet here stands evidence, undeniable and overwhelming. The gods are real, that they respond to worship, that they offer relationship to those willing to embrace them. The custodians attempt to intervene repeatedly. They recognize the corruption spreading through the word-bearers, see the transformation taking hold as carefully maintained discipline gives way to eager receptivity. Achillan tries to kill Ingerthal during one of her sermons, his guardian spear striking faster than normal perception can track. But Argyltal moves faster still, his transhuman reflexes enhanced by something more than genetics, deflecting the blow that would have ended the woman's life. The confrontation escalates into violence. Custodians against word-bearers, golden warriors who embody the Emperor's will, battling crimson-clad zealots who have begun to embrace something older and darker. The fight is brutal and one-sided. The custodians are individually superior, each one worth a dozen normal space marines in combat. but they face 1,000 word-bearers whose augmented strength now carries taint-granted enhancement, whose desperation to protect their newfound truth exceeds any concern for survival. One by one, the custodians fall. Their golden armor crumples under massed bolter fire. Their weapons shatter against ceramite blessed by forces the Emperor would not acknowledge. Aquilon fights longest, his guardian spear reaping word-bearers with every thrust, his combat skills honed through centuries of service, demonstrating why custodians represent humanity's finest warriors. But numbers and corruption prove decisive. He falls finally to concentrated fire, his armor breached, his augmented biology failing under damage that would have killed a normal man a dozen times over. In the aftermath, silence settles over the Cadian plain. The word-bearers stand among the bodies of the Emperor's chosen guardians, their armor splattered with golden blood that seems to shine with its own light. They have crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed, killed warriors whose deaths represent explicit rebellion against the master of mankind. Whatever happens next, whatever path they follow from this moment, they can never return to what they were. Ingethil congratulates them on their liberation. She speaks of how the Emperor's shackles have been broken, how they are now free to embrace their true nature without the constraints of his narrow vision. But she also warns them that their education has only begun, that what they have learned on Cadia represents merely the first layer of understanding. The real truths, the deep mysteries that will transform them completely, await in the heart of the warp storm itself. She begins her own transformation as she speaks. Her flesh ripples and reforms, bone emerging through skin to create structures impossible in standard biology. She grows, her body expanding beyond human scale, taking on characteristics that suggest demonic possession, or perhaps something more fundamental. The thing that was Ingethil, or perhaps was always more than Ingethil, towers over the assembled word-bearers, its form now openly displaying the marks of chaos. The creature introduces itself properly now. Ingethil the Ascended, demon of the ruinous powers, sent to guide the word-bearers toward their destiny. She offers to lead them deeper, to show them the realm where gods dwell, to grant them direct experience of realities the Emperor has declared forbidden. She promises transformation beyond anything they can imagine, power that will make them more than mere warriors, enlightenment that will justify everything they have sacrificed to reach this moment. Argyltal looks to Corferan, the chapter master and the master of the faith exchange, understanding without words. They have come too far to turn back now, have committed crimes that demand either vindication or damnation. The only path remaining leads forward, into the storm, into darkness, into truths that will change them in ways they cannot yet comprehend. The order is given. The serrated sun chapter will follow Ingethil into the eye of terror itself. They will abandon their ships in stable orbit, taking only a single light cruiser, the Orpheo's Lament, stripped to minimum crew. They will journey beyond the material universe, beyond the barriers reality maintains to protect itself from the predations of the warp. They will seek the gods directly, these warriors whose faith has been destroyed and remade, whose worship has been condemned and redirected. Behind them, they leave the bodies of the custodians, golden corpses scattered across Cadian soil. Above them, the rest of the fleet maintains its position, awaiting their return with growing unease. And ahead, The eye of terror pulses with malevolent light. This wound in reality through which the materium bleeds into the immaterium. This gateway to realms where physical law becomes suggestion and madness wears divinity like a crown. The Cadian population watches the word-bearers depart, these purple-eyed natives whose role in this transformation remains obscure. Corferan makes a decision as the chapter prepares to enter the storm. The Cadians know too much, have witnessed events that must remain secret until Lorgar's plans reach fruition. What happens on this world cannot be allowed to reach imperial ears, cannot risk compromising the conspiracy taking shape across the galaxy. The bombardment of Cadia proceeds with systematic thoroughness. Cyclonic torpedoes reduce population centers to ash. Conventional munitions scour the countryside of all human habitation. The purple-eyed people who welcome the word-bearers, who showed them the path to new gods, perish in their millions. Their knowledge dies with them, their traditions erased, their connection to the powers they served severed through the simple expedient of mass extermination. Only when sensors confirm no human life signs remain does the fleet withdraw. The Serrated Sun chapter, reduced to a few hundred warriors aboard the Orpheo's Lament, disappears into the eye of terror. Behind them, Cadia lies dead and empty, its population obliterated, its sacred sites reduced to rubble. The Imperium will resettle this world in future centuries, unaware of what transpired here, ignorant of the role this planet played in birthing the greatest heresy humanity will ever face. But the future remains distant. In this moment, as the Orpheo's Lament penetrates the warp storm's outer edges, as reality gives way to impossible geometries and natural law becomes optional, the word-bearers of the Serrated Sun chapter face transformation that will make them the first of a terrible new breed. They go seeking gods, and in the heart of the eye of terror, the gods are waiting to answer. The Orpheo's Lament shudders as it passes through the storm's threshold. This is not the familiar turbulence of warp travel, the controlled immersion in the immaterium that allows faster than light transit. This is something else entirely, a plunge into depths where the distinction between real and unreal loses all meaning, where consciousness itself becomes a liability as the mind struggles to process input it was never designed to handle. The ship's Geller field maintains a bubble of real space around the vessel. This ancient technology generates an envelope of material reality, holding back the predatory entities that swarm through the warp like sharks, drawn to blood in water. But even this protection feels inadequate here, the field flickering under pressures it was never meant to withstand. The crew can feel presences pressing against the barrier, intelligences vast and hungry and utterly alien testing the defenses for weakness. Ingethel, the Ascended, moves through the ship freely, her demonic form no longer constrained by pretense of humanity. She guides the Orpheos, Lament along paths only she can perceive, steering through currents that would shred unprepared vessels. She speaks constantly, her voice carrying through every corridor, every compartment, describing what they will witness, preparing them for revelations that will shatter comfortable certainties. The word-bearers gather in the ship's grand assembly hall, this space designed to hold the entire chapter for ceremonies and briefings. They have removed their helms, these warriors who normally maintain full armor in combat conditions, wanting to experience what comes next without barriers between themselves and reality. They can feel the ship moving through impossible dimensions, sense the thinning of the veil between themselves and something that both terrifies and attracts with equal force. Argyltal stands at the front of the assembled chapter, his enhanced senses registering changes in his brothers that mirror transformations in himself. Their eyes have taken on a fevered quality, pupils dilated despite the hall's bright illumination. Their breathing has synchronized without conscious effort, creating a rhythm that seems to resonate with the ship's passage through the storm. They are changing already, these warriors, their bodies and minds preparing for contact with forces that will rewrite them at fundamental levels. Ingithal's voice fills the hall, no longer emerging from any single point, but seeming to originate from everywhere simultaneously. She speaks of what they are about to witness, the ocean of souls that comprises the warp's true nature. She describes how every emotion, every thought, every psychic impulse of every living being in the materium creates ripples in this dimension. How these ripples combine and concentrate, forming patterns and structures, and eventually entities possessed of their own terrible awareness. The Orfeo's lament breaches some final barrier, and suddenly the word-bearers can see. The hall's walls become transparent, or perhaps cease to exist, leaving them apparently suspended in void that is not void, space that is not space. An ocean extends in all directions, its substance composed of light and darkness intermingled, colors that hurt to perceive, geometries that fold back on themselves in ways that make mockery of Euclidean mathematics. This is the true warp, the immaterium unfiltered by Geller fields or navigators' careful plotting. This is where human souls come to rest after the body's termination, where demons breed and multiply, where the chaos gods themselves dwell in palaces built from concepts given form. The word-bearers stare into depths that reflect their own selves back at them, see their fears and hopes and secret shames made manifest, watch as entities emerge from the psychic soup to examine these mortal beings who have dared venture into their realm. Ingithal directs their attention to specific phenomena. She shows them the remnants of the Eldari Empire, those Xenos whose fall birthed Slanesh in an explosion of excess that tore reality itself. Great cities float in the warp, their architecture based on principles the materium cannot support, their populations consumed by the youngest chaos god in its moment of terrible birth. The word-bearers witness an empire's ending, see how hubris and pride and unlimited indulgence created conditions for catastrophe. The daemon guides them deeper still, into regions where even the warp's chaotic nature gives way to something approaching order. Here exist the domains of the chaos gods themselves, territories carved from the immaterium through sheer force of will and belief. Each realm reflects its master's nature, manifesting themes and imagery that correspond to the god's particular obsessions and desires. They glimpse Khorne's brass citadel first, this fortress built from the rage of 1 billion conflicts, its walls constructed from the weapons of warriors who fell in battle. Rivers of blood flow through its courtyards, fuel perpetual storms that rage above its battlements. The blood, God himself sits upon his throne of skulls, his attention fixed on the material realm, where his worshippers continue their eternal harvest of violence. Tzeentch's crystal labyrinth appears next, this impossible maze that exists in more dimensions than mortal minds can track. Its passages shift and reform constantly, rearranging according to plans so complex that even their creator must sometimes pause to remember their purpose. The changer of ways moves through his domain like living thought, his form never stable, his attention fixed on schemes that span millennia. Nurgle's garden spreads before them, this expanse of twisted vegetation and pools of disease filth that somehow radiates contentment and acceptance. The Plague Father tends his plants with grandfatherly care, cultivating new pestilences, crossbreeding viruses, creating biological horror with the dedication of Master Gardener perfecting his roses. Demons shaped like distended corpses help with the work, their laughter carrying genuine joy. Slanesh's palace reveals itself last, this structure built from pleasure and pain rendered into architecture. Its halls echo with screams that could be ecstasy or agony or both. Its chambers contain delights and tortures that blur the boundary between sensation and damnation. The Dark Prince moves through corridors draped with living flesh, savoring experiences that would destroy lesser beings simply through exposure. The word bearers witness all of this from their suspended vantage, their minds struggling to process the immensity of what they see. These are gods, true divinities whose power exceeds the emperor's by orders of magnitude he would never acknowledge. These are beings who existed before humanity evolved consciousness, who will endure long after human civilization has crumbled to dust, and these beings notice the word-bearers watching them. The attention of the Chaos Gods turns toward the Orpheo's lament like searchlights focusing on insects, the sheer weight of their awareness pressing against the ship's structure, testing the integrity of systems designed to protect mortal minds from contact with the divine. The word-bearers feel their thoughts being examined, their souls laid bare, their worthiness evaluated by intelligences that contain multitudes beyond counting, and the gods are pleased. These warriors have come seeking truth despite their creator's prohibitions, have risked everything to acknowledge realities the emperor commanded them to deny. Their faith, once directed toward a being who rejected it, now flows toward powers that hunger for such worship, that grow stronger through the devotion of mortal believers. The Chaos Gods see opportunity in the word-bearers, potential allies in a war that has raged since before the material universe achieves stability. Ingethel speaks of what must happen next. The word-bearers have witnessed the truth of the gods' existence, have seen evidence that validates their spiritual yearning. But witnessing is not the same as understanding. Observation differs from experience. To truly serve the powers they have discovered, to become instruments worthy of divine attention, the word-bearers must transform more fundamentally. They must accept the gods into themselves, allow demonic entities to merge with their transhuman biology, become living bridges between materium and immaterium. The demon explains the process. The Geller field will be lowered for precisely calculated duration. The barrier between ship and warp will dissolve, allowing entities to flood aboard. These entities will seek hosts among the word-bearers, melding with their flesh and consciousness to create unions more powerful than either component alone. Those who survive this union will become the Gal Vorbak, the blessed sons, first of a new breed of warrior that combines transhuman enhancement with demonic possession. Argyltal understands what this means. Not all will survive. Demonic possession represents the ultimate violation, the colonization of body and soul by foreign intelligence. Some hosts will prove incompatible, their biology rejecting the demon or their consciousness shattering under the strain. Those who fail will perish, their remains consumed by the same entities that destroyed them. But those who succeed will gain power beyond imagination, will become living weapons capable of feats impossible for normal space marines. The chapter master looks at his warriors, sees acceptance in their eyes rather than fear. They have come too far to turn back now, have sacrificed too much to refuse this final transformation. If the gods demand this of them, if proving worthy requires submission to possession, then so be it. Better to die in service to powers that acknowledge their faith than to live denying truths they can no longer ignore. The decision is made. The tech priests who maintain the Orpheo's lament receive orders they never expected to hear. Lower the Geller field. The cogitators processing this command delay, their simple machine spirits unable to comprehend instructions that violate every safety protocol. But the word bearers are insistent, their authority absolute aboard this vessel. The field generators power down, their protective energies dissipating into the warp. For a moment, nothing happens. The ship floats in the eye of the storm, exposed and vulnerable, its crew holding collective breath. Then the breach occurs, reality giving way before the pressure of entities that have been waiting for exactly this opportunity. Demons flood through the opening like water through burst dam, their forms adapting to three-dimensional space as they manifest aboard the Orpheo's lament. The word-bearers stand their ground as the tide of chaos engulfs them. These are not the lesser demons that plague psychers or haunt corrupted worlds. These are entities specifically selected by the Chaos Gods themselves, chosen for compatibility with the warriors they will inhabit. They move through the assembly hall with purpose, examining each word-bearer, seeking those whose souls resonate at frequencies that promise successful union. Argyltal watches a demon approach him. It appears as living flame given form and will, its substance flickering between states that include solid, liquid, gas, and things for which material physics provides no category. The demon circles him, its attention pressing against his consciousness like physical weight. He can feel it testing him, probing his thoughts and memories, searching for weakness or strength or compatibility. The demon speaks inside his mind, its voice bypassing normal hearing to resonate directly in his thoughts. It names itself a realm, claims to have watched Argyltal since the moment the word-bearer first questioned his father's rejection of faith. It offers partnership, not subjugation, promises that their union will preserve his identity while granting power necessary to serve the gods. But it also warns that acceptance is irrevocable, that once merged they will remain entangled until death and perhaps beyond. Argyltal accepts without hesitation. He opens himself to the demon, lowering every defense his training and genetics have built against psychic intrusion. Realm flows into him like tide, filling emptied space, merging with his consciousness in ways that should annihilate identity. For a moment, Argyltal experiences total dissolution, his sense of self fragmenting under the demon's presence. Then, impossibly, he begins to cohere again, but changed, expanded, his awareness now encompassing both mortal limitation and demonic capability. Throughout the assembly hall, similar unions occur. Word-bearers open themselves to the demons circling them, allow entities of pure warp stuff to colonize their transhuman biology. Some unions proceed smoothly, demon and warrior merging with almost organic ease. Others struggle, incompatibilities emerging as foreign consciousness battles with host. Those who fail scream as the demons consume them from within. their bodies collapsing into puddles of flesh and armor that steam as demonic energies burn away all coherence. More than half the chapter perishes in this first wave of possession. Warriors who survived decades of combat, who endured transformation from human to transhuman, who conquered worlds in the Emperor's name, simply cease to exist as demons overwhelm their capacity to maintain identity. Their deaths are not peaceful. They die screaming, begging for mercy from powers that do not comprehend such concepts. Their augmented biology failing under stresses it was never designed to endure. The survivors stand among the steaming remains of their brothers, their armor now marked with changes that reflect the demons dwelling within. Crimson ceramite darkens to deeper shades, almost black in places, shot through with veins of color that shift and pulse. Their forms have changed as well, grown larger and more terrible, muscle and bone restructured to accommodate demonic enhancement. They are no longer simply space marines. They are Gal Vorbak, the blessed sons, first of the possessed. Argyltal looks down at his hands, sees claws where fingers should be, watches his flesh ripple as Raum adjusts to physical form. He can feel the demon's presence constantly now, not as invader but as partner, their thoughts intermingling until distinguishing between self and other becomes academic exercise. He has gained power beyond anything his original biology could produce, but the cost has been high, measured in brothers consumed and humanity compromised. The Geller field generators restart, re-establishing the barrier between ship and warp. The demons that failed to find hosts are expelled, forced back into the immaterium by a reassertion of natural law. The survivors of the Serrated Sun chapter stand in the blood-soaked assembly hall, numbering fewer than 500 where once 1,000 stood. They have become something new, something terrible, something that will change the course of galactic history. Ingathil congratulates them on their ascension. She speaks of how they have proven worthy in the eyes of the gods, how their willingness to sacrifice everything demonstrates faith, surpassing that of any ordinary worshippers. She promises that greater transformations await, that what they have experienced aboard the Orpheo's Lament represents only the beginning of their evolution. But first, they must return to the Materium, must bring news of their discoveries to Lorgar, must help guide the rest of the word-bearers toward enlightenment. The journey back through the Eye of Terror proceeds more swiftly than the inward voyage. The Gal Vorbak now carry demons within them, making them partially creatures of the warp, capable of navigating the immaterium with instinctive understanding impossible for purely material beings. The Orpheo's Lament emerges from the storm battered but intact, its crew reduced by more than half but transformed in ways that justify the casualties. In real space, barely minutes have passed. The word-bearer's fleet, waiting in orbit around dead Cadia, has barely begun to worry about the Serrated Sun's absence. But aboard the light cruiser, 7 months have elapsed, 7 months of horror and revelation and transformation that have rewritten everything the survivors thought they knew about reality. They've become the Blessed Sons, the Gal Vorbak first of the possessed, proof that gods are real and willing to share their power with those brave or mad enough to embrace them. Argyltal stands on the bridge, looking out at the stars of normal space, feeling Raum's presence within him like second heartbeat. He knows what comes next. They must return to the main fleet, must share their discoveries with Cor Farron and the rest of the Legion. They must send word to Lorgar. must tell their Primarch that his suspicions were correct, that gods do exist beyond the Emperor's narrow truths, that faith has been validated in ways more terrible and more wonderful than anyone imagined. And then the real work begins, converting the rest of the word-bearers, spreading the truth to other legions, undermining the Imperium from within, while building toward the moment when masks can be dropped and rebellion declared openly. The Gal Vorbak will be the vanguard of this transformation, living proof that partnership between mortal and demon is possible, that the Chaos Gods offer rewards to those willing to worship them. The Orfeo's lament sets course for rendezvous with the main fleet. Behind them, the Eye of Terror continues to pulse with malevolent light. This wound in reality that has claimed the serrated sun chapter and remade them into instruments of forces older and darker than the Imperium can comprehend. Ahead lies conspiracy and betrayal, heresy and civil war, the corruption of the greatest crusade humanity has ever known. The pilgrimage has ended. The blessed sons return home, carrying within them seeds of a transformation that will consume the galaxy in flames. And in the warp, the Chaos Gods watch and wait, pleased with this first step toward their ultimate victory, the merger of materium and immaterium, the creation of a cosmos where belief shapes reality and worship grants power beyond limit. Lorgar receives the news aboard the Fidelitas Lex, his flagship that has become as much monastery as warship. The Primarch has spent months in isolation since Monarchia, his quarters sealed to all but Cor Ferran and Erebus. He emerges now to meet the survivors of the serrated sun, his golden features marked by something that might be hope or might be dread, or perhaps both intermingled. The Gal Vorbak gather before their Gene Father in the Grand Amphitheatre, this space designed to accommodate the entire Legion for ceremonies and pronouncements. They number fewer than 500 now, their crimson armor bearing marks of transformation that cannot be explained through normal damage. Argyltal leads them, the chapter master who has become something more and less than the warrior who departed for Cadia months ago. Lorgar descends from his throne to walk among his transformed sons. He examines them with attention that combines scientific curiosity with spiritual yearning, his transhuman senses cataloguing changes, while his faith seeks confirmation of truths he desperately needs to believe. He reaches out to touch Argyltal's armor, traces the veins of shifting color that pulse through the ceramite, feels power radiating from his son that exceeds anything genetics alone could produce. The Primarch knows immediately what has happened. These are not corrupted warriors whose weak minds have fallen prey to warp entities. These are willing hosts, warriors who have accepted demonic possession as gift rather than curse, who have merged with entities from beyond reality to become living bridges between worlds. This is everything Lorgar has hoped for since Monarchia. Validation that gods exist and welcome worship, proof that the Emperor's prohibitions mask deeper truths. Argyltal makes his report, speaking in voice that carries harmonics no human throat should produce. He describes the pilgrimage to Cadia, the meeting with Ingethil, the journey into the Eye of Terror itself. He tells of witnessing the Chaos Gods in their domains, of feeling their attention and receiving their approval, of accepting demonic possession as necessary price for power and enlightenment. He presents his surviving brothers as evidence, these Gal Vorbak whose very existence demonstrates the partnership between mortal and demon is possible. The Primarch listens with hunger that borders on desperation. This is the answer to questions that have consumed him since his faith was destroyed in Monarchia's ashes. Not merely evidence that gods exist, but pathway to relationship with them. Method by which humanity can acknowledge powers the Emperor commanded them to ignore. Lorgar sees in the Galvorbak the future he has been seeking, a model for transformation that can spread from the word bearers to other legions, ultimately remaking the Imperium itself. But he also sees the cost. More than half the Serrated Sun chapter perished during the possession process, consumed by demons whose compatibility with their hosts proved insufficient. Even the survivors bear marks of terrible change, their humanity compromised by entities that do not value mortal concerns like mercy or restraint. What Lorgar contemplates is not simple religious conversion, but fundamental alteration of human nature, merger with forces that may grant power but will demand prices difficult to calculate. The Primarch makes his decision. The word bearers will embrace the Chaos Gods fully, abandoning all pretense of loyalty to the Emperor's vision. They will spread this enlightenment to other legions, convert their brothers through persuasion or manipulation or simple exposure to truths too overwhelming to deny. They will build toward the moment when they can declare their allegiance openly, when the Imperium itself can be remade according to divine will rather than the Emperor's narrow materialism. But such transformation requires time and careful planning. The word, bearers, number 100,000 warriors scattered across dozens of compliance actions, converting them all to chaos worship while maintaining operational security represents challenge of staggering complexity. Moreover, the custodians assigned to monitor the Legion have surely reported their concerns to Terra, meaning the Emperor's attention may already be turning toward the 17th with a renewed suspicion. Lorgar calls his most trusted advisors to council. Cor Faran attends, the foster father whose guidance has shaped the Primarch since childhood. Erebus joins them, the first chaplain whose manipulation will prove crucial to coming events. Argyltal represents the Galvorbak, bringing perspective of one who has experienced full transformation. Together they plan the corruption of the galaxy, these architects of heresy who will bring the Imperium to the edge of annihilation. The strategy they develop operates on multiple levels simultaneously. First, the word bearers themselves must be converted, each warrior brought to understanding of truths discovered in the eye of terror. This proceeds gradually, testing each brother's receptivity before revealing the full extent of the Legion's transformation. Chaplains play a crucial role in this process, using their authority over spiritual matters to guide warriors toward acceptance of chaos. Second, other legions must be infiltrated and corrupted. Erebus proposes the exchange of chaplains as mechanism for spreading influence, offering the word bearers spiritual advisors to brother legions who may benefit from their expertise. This allows insertion of agents into other forces, warriors who can identify potential converts and plant seeds of doubt regarding the Emperor's vision. The process must proceed slowly, avoiding detection until transformation has progressed too far to reverse. Third, the Imperium's population must be prepared for eventual revelation. Cults dedicated to chaos worship spread across compliant worlds, disguised as local traditions or mystery, religions that seem compatible with imperial doctrine. These cults establish networks of believers who can be activated when the time comes, providing ground support for military operations while demonstrating that the gods have followers beyond the legions themselves. Fourth, and most crucially, the War Master must be turned. Horus Lupercal commands the combined might of all Space Marine legions, his authority second only to the Emperor himself. If Horus can be brought into the conspiracy, if his military genius can be directed against the Imperium rather than in its service, victory becomes possible. Lorgar begins laying groundwork for this crucial conversion, studying his brother for weaknesses, identifying opportunities for manipulation. The word-bearers resume their part in the Great Crusade with a renewed vigor. Their conquest tallies climb dramatically, surpassing many other legions as they demonstrate that Monarchia's lesson has been learned. Worlds fall before them in rapid succession, compliance actions executed with efficiency that earns imperial recognition. But beneath this facade of loyalty, transformation proceeds according to careful design. On each conquered world, the word-bearers plant seeds of corruption. They establish secret temples dedicated to chaos worship, disguised as secular institutions or hidden beneath ordinary buildings. They identify populations most receptive to religious belief, cultivating these groups through careful manipulation while eliminating those who might resist. They leave behind cultists who will continue spreading the faith long after the Legion has departed, creating networks that span multiple systems and will prove invaluable when rebellion comes. The Gal Vorbaks serve as elite cadre within the Legion, their presence inspiring awe and terror in equal measure. Lorgar uses them selectively, deploying the possessed only when their unique capabilities justify the risk of exposure. They excel at shock assaults, their demonic enhancements allowing feats impossible for normal Space Marines. They serve as living proof of the gods' favor, visible evidence that chaos worship grants concrete rewards. Argel Tal becomes Lorgar's favored son during these years, the chapter master whose transformation embodies everything the Primarch seeks for his legion. The two confer regularly, sharing insights about demonic partnership, discussing theological implications of their discoveries. Argeltal describes the experience of possessing from perspective of willing host, explains how Ram's presence has enhanced rather than destroyed his identity. He becomes advocate for transformation, persuading resistant word bearers that accepting demons represents enlightenment rather than corruption. Not all word bearers embrace this path willingly. Some warriors resist the abandonment of everything they believed during their service to the Emperor. They question whether chaos worship represents truth or simply different form of delusion, whether the gods who offer power can be trusted to keep their promises. These doubters become problems that must be addressed through conversion or elimination. The Legion develops rituals for creating new Gal Vorbak, refining the process that claimed so many lives aboard the Orpheo's Lament. Tech priests study the mechanics of demonic possession, identifying factors that improve compatibility between host and entity. Chaplains prepare candidates psychologically, breaking down resistance to invasion of consciousness while building acceptance of transformation as necessary evolution. The new Gal Vorbak created through these improved methods have higher survival rates, though the cost in those who fail remains substantial. Erebus proves particularly skilled at manipulation during these years. The first chaplain travels widely, offering the word-bearer's spiritual expertise to other legions while secretly identifying potential converts. He befriends warriors in the Lunar Wolves, gaining access to Horus's inner circle. He cultivates relationships with disaffected members of various legions, those who harbor doubts about the Emperor's vision or resentments over perceived slights. Each conversation plants seeds. Each act of friendship creates obligation that can later be exploited. Core Farron focuses on building infrastructure for long-term conflict. He establishes forge complexes on worlds secured by the word-bearers, ensuring supply chains for weapons and armor independent of mechanicum oversight. He recruits cultists from compliant populations, training them in basic military tactics, creating armies that can support legion operations when rebellion begins. He coordinates with other traitor elements, building alliances that will prove crucial when the Imperium fractures. The conspiracy spreads like cancer through the Imperium structure. Chaos cults multiply on worlds thought secure, their practices growing bolder as they sense coming change. Word-bearers, chaplains poison other legions from within, corrupting warriors who trust them as brothers. Infrastructure for heresy takes shape across multiple sectors, hidden in plain sight, protected by networks of sympathizers and the simple impossibility of imperial authorities monitoring everything at once. And Lorgar begins courting his brothers, those primarchs whose natures or circumstances make them vulnerable to corruption. He spends time with Magnus, discussing the nature of psychic phenomena, planting ideas about powers the Emperor has forbidden them to acknowledge. He reaches out to Mortarion, sympathizing with resentments the Death Guard's Primarch harbors. He studies Fulgrim and Angron, Perturabo and Kurz, identifying points of leverage that can be used to turn them. When the time comes, the Emperor remains ignorant of developments beneath the surface of his Imperium. His attention focuses on terror and the mysterious project that has drawn him away from the Great Crusade, some undertaking so critical it justifies abandoning direct command of his armies. The word-bearers operate in this shadow of inattention, using their father's distraction to build foundations for rebellion that will shake the Imperium to its core. 4 decades pass between Monarchia and the moment when masks finally drop. 4 decades during which the word-bearers spread corruption while maintaining facade of loyalty. 4 decades when the Imperium stands at the height of its power, ignorant of rot spreading through its foundations. 4 decades that Lorgar uses to convert his sons, to infiltrate other legions, to prepare for civil war that will determine humanity's future. And at the culmination of these preparations, when all pieces have been positioned and all potential converts identified, Lorgar turns his attention to the prize that will make rebellion possible. Horus Lupercal, the War Master, the Emperor's favored son, commander of the Great Crusade, in their father's absence. If Horus can be turned, if his loyalty can be broken and redirected toward the Chaos Gods, the Imperium will have no defense against what follows. The trap is set on Davin, a world with history of violence and corruption. Erebus has been there before, has prepared the ground carefully, establishing cults and ensuring conditions for the planned ritual. Horus will go to Davin, expecting simple compliance action. He will encounter something else entirely, and when he emerges, assuming he survives what has been prepared for him, the War Master will be transformed in ways that make the galaxy's burning inevitable. Davin orbits its star, like a wound that refuses to heal. The world bears scars from previous compliance actions, craters marking where resistance was broken. cities rebuilt in the Imperium's image, but never quite erasing what came before. The population practices warrior traditions that predate imperial contact, rituals involving blood and oaths that seem compatible with imperial culture, but carry undertones of something older and darker. The Lunar Wolves arrive at Davin, responding to reports of rebellion among the warrior lodges. These organizations supposedly promote brotherhood across company lines, but intelligence suggests they have become vehicles for sedition. Horus takes personal command of the pacification. The War Master, who rarely involves himself in such minor actions, but who has been subtly guided to this place through suggestions planted by Erebus during seemingly casual conversations. The campaign proceeds according to expectations initially. Lunar Wolves companies deploy across Davin's surface, engaging warrior bands that fight with desperate ferocity. The resistance seems fiercer than warranted by the stakes. The natives willing to die rather than surrender, their tactics suggesting coordination beyond what primitive culture should achieve. Horus leads from the front as always, his presence inspiring his sons to feats of valor that crush opposition wherever they engage. Then comes the wound that changes everything. A warrior priest strikes the War Master during close combat, his weapon coated with substances that should not exist on world this technologically primitive. The blade penetrates Horus's armor, bypasses his transhuman biology's normal defenses, delivers toxins that begin corrupting his flesh at cellular level. The War Master collapses, his augmented body struggling against contamination designed specifically to overwhelm even Primarch physiology. The Lunar Wolves carry their gene father back to the fleet in desperate haste. Apothecaries examine the wound, their instruments detecting corruption beyond their capacity to treat. Standard antitoxins prove useless. Advanced medical procedures fail to halt the spreading contamination. Horus lies in fever-induced delirium, his transhuman healing compromised by pathogens that seem almost alive. Adapting to counter every treatment attempted, Erebus arrives with the Word-Bearers contingent attached to the Lunar Wolves fleet. The first chaplain offers assistance, claims knowledge of Davin's warrior traditions that might provide cure where imperial medicine has failed. He speaks of rituals practiced by the native priesthood, healing ceremonies that have proven effective against similar afflictions. The desperate Lunar Wolves, watching their Primarch sink deeper into fever, accept this offer despite reservations about methods that skirt dangerously close to superstition. The ritual takes place in a temple complex far from imperial oversight. Horus is brought to this place barely conscious, his massive form requiring multiple warriors to transport. The chamber prepared for the ceremony carries decorations that would alarm any Mechanicum priest, symbols that reference powers the Imperium denies exist. But the Lunar Wolves who accompany their Primarch see only desperate hope, any chance to save the father they love more than their own lives. Erebus conducts the ceremony with practiced ease. He arranges the War Master's body according to geometric principles, positions candles and incense at specific points around the circle, chants invocations in languages the Lunar Wolves do not recognize. The first chaplain explains each step as necessary component of the healing process, traditional medicine that operates according to principles imperial science has forgotten. But the truth is far darker. The ritual designed not to heal, but to open Horus's consciousness to direct contact with powers that have been waiting for exactly this vulnerability. The Warmaster enters trance state that superficially resembles sleep, but actually represents departure from material reality. His consciousness drifts through the immaterium, unprotected by the mental disciplines he normally maintains. The Chaos Gods reach out to this drifting awareness, showing Horus visions calculated to break his loyalty and redirect his ambitions. He sees futures where the Emperor is worshipped as a god while the Primarchs are forgotten. Temples rise across the galaxy bearing the Emperor's image, populations prostrating themselves before statues of the Master of Mankind. But the Primarchs who won these worlds, who bled and sacrificed to bring them into compliance, receive no recognition. They have become tools discarded once their usefulness ends, weapons put away when the war is won. He witnesses the Emperor's secret project on Terra, this work that has consumed their father's attention for decades, the Webway, humanity's potential access to the ancient Eldari transportation network, a means of traveling without exposing ships to the warp's dangers. But Horus sees the Emperor's true intention in this project, recognizes it as preparation for transformation that will elevate the Master of Mankind to godhood while leaving the Primarchs behind, their purpose served, their existence no longer necessary. The visions show betrayal layered upon betrayal. The Emperor created the Primarchs as tools rather than sons, genetic experiments designed to serve specific functions in the Great Crusade. Their love for him, their desire for his approval, their need to prove themselves worthy. All of it based on relationships that were never genuine, bonds manufactured through genetic programming rather than authentic connection. They are slaves who mistake their chains for family ties. The Chaos Gods offer alternative. They speak directly to Horus in the vision space, their voices carrying promises of partnership rather than servitude. They describe power that could be his if he chooses to embrace them. Victory over the Emperor who has used him so thoroughly. They paint pictures of galaxy remade according to Horus's vision. Humanity elevated through worship of entities that genuinely value their believers rather than merely exploiting them. Most crucially, they reveal truth about the warp and the immaterium. These are not empty spaces filled only with background radiation and random psychic phenomena. These are realms populated by genuine divinities, powers that shape the galaxy's evolution, entities that deserve acknowledgement rather than denial. The Emperor's prohibition on worship represents not enlightenment, but willful blindness, refusal to acknowledge realities that threaten his monopoly on power. Horus emerges from the vision trance transformed in ways invisible to casual observation. His wound has healed, the toxins purged from his system through mechanisms that seem compatible with imperial medical theory, but actually represent warp-granted regeneration. He appears restored to health, his transhuman vigor returned in full measure. But internally, fundamentally, the Warmaster has changed, his loyalty to the Emperor broken and redirected toward powers that have shown him truths too terrible and too compelling to ignore. Erebus watches this transformation with satisfaction carefully concealed. The first chaplain has executed the most crucial phase of Lorgar's plan, turned the Emperor's favorite son into instrument of his destruction. Everything that follows will flow from this moment, from this breaking and remaking of the Warmaster's faith. The Horus Heresy begins here, in this temple on Davin, through ritual disguised as healing and corruption presented as revelation. the Warmaster returns to his fleet seemingly unchanged. He resumes command of the Great Crusade with characteristic efficiency, issuing orders that conform to strategic doctrine, maintaining relationships with brother primarchs and favored subordinates. But privately, in consultation with those he has identified as potential allies, Horus begins speaking of the Emperor's betrayal, of truths revealed during his fever dream, of necessity for action before their father's transformation to godhood makes resistance impossible. The conspiracy spreads outward from Horus like ripples in poisoned water. He reaches out to brother primarchs he believes will be receptive, those whose natures or circumstances make them vulnerable to arguments against continued loyalty. Lorgar, obviously, who has been waiting for exactly this moment, who can now reveal the full extent of word bearer's transformation. But others as well, primarchs whose resentments or ambitions or ideological differences with the Emperor can be exploited. Fulgrim of the Emperor's children proves receptive to suggestions about perfection beyond what the Emperor envisions. Angron of the World Eaters requires little persuasion. His rage against the Emperor, who failed to save his companions on New Syria, already burning hot. Mortarion of the Death Guard listens to arguments about the Emperor's hypocrisy, his refusal to acknowledge warp entities he clearly knows exist. Perturabo of the Iron Warriors responds to validation of resentments he has harbored for decades. Alfarius of the Alpha Legion sees opportunities for complexity and manipulation that appeal to his particular obsessions. Not all contacted primarchs accept the invitation to rebellion. Some remain loyal despite appeals to their grievances, their bonds with the Emperor proving stronger than manufactured reasons for betrayal. But enough accept, enough turn, creating military force capable of challenging the Imperium itself. Half the Space Marine legions will ultimately follow Horus into heresy, their combined might representing existential threat to everything the Emperor has built. The word-bearers operate as theological advisors throughout this process of corruption. Their chaplains explain the nature of the Chaos Gods to newly turned legions, provide framework for understanding powers the Emperor commanded them to ignore. They conduct rituals that open the converted to warp influence, facilitate contact between willing hosts and demonic entities, create more Galvorbak from the ranks of newly heretical legions. They build the spiritual infrastructure necessary to sustain rebellion, ensuring that military force is backed by religious conviction. Lorgar meets with Horus aboard the Vengeful Spirit, the flagship where the Warmaster coordinates the rebellion taking shape. The two primarchs confer as equals for the first time, no longer son seeking approval from favored brother, but co-conspirators united in purpose. Lorgar shares everything the word-bearers have learned, describes the Chaos Gods in detail, offers guidance on how best to harness their power. Horus listens with attention born from recognition that he has much to learn. The military genius alone will not suffice against the Emperor. Yet tension exists even at this early stage between the Warmaster's goals and the Word-Bearer's vision. Horus sees the Chaos Gods as tools to be used in his war against the Emperor, sources of power that can level the playing field against his father's psychic might. He does not truly worship them, does not surrender himself to their purposes the way Lorgar advocates. This pragmatic rather than devotional relationship with the ruinous powers will create friction as the heresy progresses. Plans solidify for the opening moves of civil war. The traitor legions must consolidate their forces before revealing their allegiance, ensure they can strike decisively before loyalist elements can organize effective resistance. Istvan III is chosen as the site where traitors within each legion will be eliminated. Loyalists who cannot be turned purged through carefully orchestrated massacre. Istvan V will follow, the trap where loyalist legions, responding to the perceived rebellion, will find themselves surrounded and annihilated by overwhelming traitor force. The word bearers prepare for their own particular vengeance. Kalth beckons, that jewel of Ultramar, where Robuta Guilliman has built civilization that embodies everything the 13th Legion represents. The word bearers remember Monarchia, remember kneeling in ashes while Ultramarines stood in judgment. Remember the humiliation that broke their faith and sent them seeking darker truths. Now they will repay that humiliation with interest, will bring fire and demon to Guilliman's perfect realm, will teach the 13th Legion that their supposed superiority means nothing before the power of the gods. Erebus coordinates with Corferan, the two lieutenants who have guided Lorgar since childhood, now planning operations that will cripple the largest loyalist legion. They design a trap of remarkable complexity, exploiting Guilliman's trust and the Ultramarines' assumption that military exercises with their brother legion represent routine cooperation. The word bearers will gather at Kalth ostensibly for joint operations, then strike without warning, their betrayal catching the Ultramarines at moment of maximum vulnerability. Simultaneously, the word bearers will launch their shadow crusade alongside the World Eaters. This combined operation will target the 500 worlds of Ultramar, systematically destroying the civilization Guilliman has spent decades building. Each world burned, each population slaughtered, each monument toppled will serve dual purpose, both military objective and ritual component in grand working that will birth the ruin storm, a warp tempest vast enough to isolate entire sectors of the Imperium from terror. The components of this great ritual have been prepared for years. Chaos cults spread across hundreds of worlds await activation, their members ready to conduct synchronized sacrificial ceremonies. Warp rifts, carefully cultivated through subtle corruption, stand ready to expand when sufficient psychic energy is channeled through them. Demonic entities have been promised opportunities for manifestation in exchange for service during coming battles. Everything is in place, requiring only the signal to begin. That signal comes with the drop site massacre on Istvan V, where loyalist legions attempting to punish Horus's perceived rebellion find themselves betrayed by supposed allies. As the slaughter unfolds, as Space Marines turn on Space Marines in coordinated atrocity that shocks even the Chaos Gods, the Word-Bearers and World Eaters begin their assault on Ultramar. The Horus Heresy enters its full fury, civil war igniting across the Imperium, brother fighting brother while humanity's enemies watch and prepare to exploit the carnage. Lorgar stands aboard the Fidelitas Lex as his legion departs for Kalth, his thoughts turning to the Ultramarines and their Primarch, to Guilliman, who executed the Emperor's orders at Monarchia. The Master of the Faith does not hate his brother, does not seek revenge from personal animosity. But the word-bearers require this, need the catharsis of violence against those who symbolize everything they rejected, and the ruin storm requires blood in quantities only total war can provide. The Primarch of the 17th Legion speaks a quiet prayer to the Chaos Gods as his fleet enters the warp. He asks for their blessing on the coming conflict, their guidance through battles ahead, their ultimate approval of the transformation he has brought to the Imperium. The gods hear this prayer and respond with satisfaction, pleased that their champion proceeds according to the grand design they have woven across millennia. The word bearers go to war, bearing divine favor, their faith armoring them as surely as ceramite, their devotion granting power that loyal space marines cannot match. The burning of the 500 worlds begins. The skies above Calth burn red with the fury of orbital bombardment. What was supposed to be military exercises between brother legions transforms in a heartbeat into wholesale slaughter. Word-bearers' vessels positioned in perfect firing solution open, with every weapon simultaneously, their lance strikes and macro cannon shells tearing through ultramarine ships whose defensive systems remain powered down in trust. The void fills with expanding debris clouds that moments before were proud vessels, their crews perishing without understanding why brothers have become executioners. On the surface, the massacre unfolds with similar brutality. Ultramarines forces gathered for joint operations find themselves targeted by word-bearers who drop all pretense of cooperation. Bolt rounds punch through armor turned away in friendship. Melter charges destroy vehicles whose crews cannot believe what their eyes report. The 13th Legion dies in droves during those first minutes, their tactical acumen rendered useless by inability to process betrayal on this scale. Captain Remus Ventanus experiences the opening moments in slow-motion clarity despite the chaos erupting around him. He stands with his command squad reviewing tactical displays, coordinating with word-bearers' counterparts who moments before offered suggestions about defensive positions. Then the displays flicker, communications cut out, and the word-bearer across the planning table draws his bolt pistol and fires directly into the face of Ventanus' sergeant. The round detonates, reducing the sergeant's head to spray of ceramite and bone and brain matter that spatters across the chamber. Ventanus reacts on pure combat instinct, his chains ward already moving before conscious thought can process what is happening. The blade catches the traitor word-bearer in the throat, tearing through the flexible joint seal and severing vital arteries. But even as this enemy falls, others throughout the compound open fire, their bolters turned against ultramarines who thought them allies. Ventanus watches his brothers die, cut down by warriors they trusted, the methodical slaughter executed with precision that speaks to careful planning. Throughout Calth's installations and surface positions, similar scenes unfold. Ultramarines die in thousands before they can mount coherent response. Their numbers gutted by surprise attack that exploits every vulnerability their trust created. Some fight back immediately, training overriding shock to engage the traitors. Others stand frozen, minds unable to reconcile the evidence of their senses with their understanding of brotherhood and loyalty. Both groups die, though those who fight sell their lives more dearly. Robert Gilliman stands on his flagship, MacGregor's honor when the betrayal begins. The Primarch watches through observation ports as word-bearers' vessels shatter his fleet, their targeting demonstrating familiarity with Ultramarines' tactical doctrine that could only come from extensive study. He experiences moments of complete incomprehension, his genius intellect unable to immediately process what is occurring. Then rage ignites, burning through shock, focusing his transhuman capabilities toward survival and vengeance. The McGregor's honor survives the initial barrage through positioning that proves fortunate rather than planned. The flagship was slightly out of optimal firing solution, giving its crew precious seconds to raise shields and return fire. Gilliman's orders cut through the chaos with absolute clarity, broadcasting coordinates and rally points, pulling scattered elements into coherent defensive positions. His voice carries across the fleet's communication channels, anchor of certainty in storm of confusion and death. But understanding comes slowly even for the Primarch's transhuman intellect. This is Lorgar's doing, the word-bearers executing carefully planned assault rather than random madness. The timing, the positioning, the coordination all speak to months if not years of preparation. Gilliman realizes with dawning horror that Monarchia was not merely punishment that ended the 17th Legion's religious practices. It was catalyst for transformation, far more dangerous than anything the Emperor attempted to prevent. Corferan leads the word-bearers' assault on Calth's surface, the master of the faith who serves as Lorgar's proxy in this vengeance. He coordinates the various elements of the attack with skill honed through decades of warfare. His understanding of three-dimensional battlefield tactics compensating for lack of Primarch-level genius. He deploys the cultist hordes trained over previous years, using them as expendable shock troops that overwhelm defensive positions through sheer numbers while preserving word-bearers' forces for crucial engagements. The cultists prove horrifyingly effective. These are not simply armed civilians, but trained paramilitary forces equipped with weapons stolen from imperial armories and modified according to dark designs. They fight with fanatical devotion, throwing themselves at Ultramarines' positions without regard for casualties, their deaths serving dual purpose as they weaken defenses while generating psychic energy that feeds the ritual Erebus conducts in Calth's northern regions. Erebus has withdrawn from direct combat to focus on his particular mission. The first chaplain stands at center of elaborate geometric pattern carved into Calth's surface, his voice raised in invocation that echoes across dimensions mortal senses cannot perceive. He calls to the ruinous powers, channels the deaths occurring across Calth into focused offering, uses the planet itself as component in ritual designed to tear reality open on massive scale. 8 sites across Calth's surface anchor this, working, each one staffed by dark apostles conducting synchronized ceremonies. At each location, cultists die in thousands, their throats slit on altars consecrated to the chaos gods, their blood flowing into channels that form symbols older than human civilization. The geometry of these sites corresponds to positions in the warp where barriers between realities grow thin, points of correspondence that allow material actions to have immaterial effects. The Ultramarines fight desperately to reclaim their world from the traitors desecrating it. Companies rally under surviving captains, forming defensive lines that exact terrible costs from advancing word-bearers. Veterans whose experience spans decades refuse to yield ground their Primarch claimed for the Imperium. Their discipline holding against cultist hordes and traitor space marines alike. Terminators of the First Company form defensive circles, backs together, weapons facing outward, holding positions until ammunition runs dry, and then holding with blades and fists and ceramite-shod boots. But the word-bearers have prepared too thoroughly, have committed too much force for the surprised Ultramarines to effectively resist. Calth's orbital defense platforms fall under word-bearers' control, their massive weapons turned against the planet they were built to protect. Lance strikes from orbit scour the surface, targeting ultramarine strongpoints, devastating civilian population centers, leaving craters where cities stood. The beautiful world Guilliman incorporated into Ultramar, with its forests and seas and millions of loyal citizens, transforms into tomb lit by dying star. The custodians Corferon thought eliminated on Cadia were not the only oversight the Emperor assigned. Unknown to the word-bearers, additional monitoring elements have been tracking their movements since Monarchia. These watchers have reported suspicious patterns, anomalies in the 17th Legion's operations that suggested possible backsliding. But the reports languished in administrative backlogs, their warnings unheeded as the Imperium focused on expansion rather than internal security. Now those warnings prove prescient. The word-bearers have not merely returned to religious practices the Emperor forbade. They have embraced something far worse, have allied with powers the Imperium was built to resist. The betrayal at Calth represents not simple rebellion, but fundamental corruption, transformation of loyal Space Marines into servants of entities that would destroy humanity entirely. Guilliman coordinates the defense from his flagship, even as he recognizes the hopelessness of Calth's situation. The word-bearers control orbital space, have forces too numerous to dislodge, have turned the planet's own defenses against its population. The best he can achieve is evacuation of surviving Ultramarines and whatever civilians can be reached, preserving as much of his legion as possible for the war that now seems inevitable across the entire Imperium. Reinforcements arrive from Macragge as news of the attack spreads. These vessels translate from the warp directly into a battle already lost, their commanders forced to immediately engage word-bearers' fleets rather than provide ground support. But their arrival changes the balance enough to allow organized withdrawal, gives the Ultramarines a chance to salvage some forces rather than face complete annihilation. Corferon recognizes when the moment has passed for total victory. The word-bearers have achieved their primary objective, crippling the Ultramarines while conducting the ritual necessary for Erebus's greater working. Continuing the engagement risks losing advantages already gained. He orders withdrawal. The word-bearers' forces pulling back to their vessels with practiced efficiency, leaving behind a world transformed into charnel house. The Ultramarines trapped on Calth's surface watch the traitor fleets depart, their initial relief giving way to dawning horror as they assess the true extent of damage inflicted. The orbital bombardment has not merely targeted military installations. It has stripped away Calth's atmosphere in multiple locations, rendered vast swathes of surface uninhabitable, destabilized the very star that provides warmth and light. The beautiful world is dying, its population of millions reduced to thousands of survivors huddling in underground shelters. But the worst remains hidden from immediate recognition. Erebus's ritual has succeeded beyond even Lorgar's most optimistic projections. The deaths on Calth and across dozens of worlds, simultaneously attacked by the Shadow Crusade, have generated psychic energy on scale sufficient to birth warp phenomenon of unprecedented magnitude. The ruin storm begins to manifest, this tempest in the immaterium vast enough to isolate entire sectors, preventing warp travel across regions of space measuring hundreds of light years. The storm cuts Ultramar off from Terra, prevents Guilliman from bringing his legion to the Emperor's defense during the coming siege. It isolates the 500 worlds, leaving them vulnerable to continued assault without hope of reinforcement. Most crucially, It demonstrates that the word bearers have progressed far beyond simple religious deviation. They have become practitioners of sorcery on civilizational scale, wielders of power that threatens the material universe itself. Gilliman stands in the wreckage of his perfect realm, watching smoke rise from Kalth's surface, and understands that everything has changed. The Imperium faces not rebellion that can be suppressed through military force, but existential crisis that threatens its very survival. The Emperor's greatest sons have turned against him, bringing with them powers that should not exist according to the imperial truth. The galaxy is burning, and the fires will not be easily extinguished. The Primarch of the 13th Legion swears oath of vengeance against Lorgar and the word bearers. He will hunt them, will make them answer for what they have done to Kalth and Ultramar. But first he must deal with immediate crisis, must evacuate survivors, must organize the defense of what remains of his realm. The practical concerns of war and survival take precedence over desires for revenge, no matter how justified those desires may be. Below, in Kalth's subterranean networks, a different war begins. Word-bearers left behind when their legion withdrew continue fighting, their presence transforming the underground into a labyrinth of horror. These traitors seed corruption wherever they go, establishing temples to the chaos gods in the deepest caverns, conducting rituals that call demons into material reality, creating nodes of warp taint that will persist for millennia. The Kalth underworld war will continue for years, bitter conflict between trapped forces that cannot withdraw and will not surrender. The word bearers depart, Kalth having achieved everything Lorgar desired. The Ultramarines are broken as fighting force, unable to intervene in the broader heresy. The ruin storm has manifested, cutting off entire sectors from mutual support, and most importantly, the ritual sacrifice of millions has gained favor with the Chaos Gods, earned blessings that will strengthen the traitor cause throughout the coming conflict. Kalth burns as offering to powers that demanded blood, and the word-bearers have proven their devotion through scale of slaughter conducted in the gods' names. The 500 worlds burn one after another as the word-bearers and world-eaters prosecute their campaign with systematic brutality. This is not random destruction, but calculated campaign designed to maximize suffering while advancing military objectives. Each world targeted represents carefully chosen component in Lorgar's grand ritual, sites selected for their psychic significance as much as their strategic value. Angron leads the World Eaters with savage enthusiasm. The Primarch, who has finally been given free rein to express rage that has consumed him since the Emperor failed to save his comrades on New Syria. His legion matches his fury, butchering populations with efficiency that disturbs even the word-bearers. The 12th falls upon each world like natural disaster, their chain axes reaping civilians and defenders with equal enthusiasm, their armor painted red with blood that never quite dries between engagements. Lorgar accompanies the campaign personally. The Primarch, who rarely involves himself in direct combat, now leading from the vanguard. He has transformed since Monarchia, his contemplative nature hardened through years of secret war and open heresy. The golden demigod who once built cathedrals now oversees their destruction. The priest who preached enlightenment now conducts rituals that summon demons to devour the faithful. The Shadow Crusade operates according to patterns that serve multiple purposes simultaneously. Military targets are destroyed to prevent ultramarines from regrouping, eliminating bases and supply depots that could support defensive operations. But each destruction is also ritual component, conducted with specific timing and methodology that channels psychic energy toward the Ruinstorm's continued growth. The word-bearers turn warfare into worship, their violence sanctified through dedication to the Chaos Gods. Argyltal and the Gal Vorbak serve as elite strike force throughout the campaign. These possessed warriors excel at shock assaults, their demonic enhancements allowing them to survive situations that would annihilate normal space marines. They lead boarding actions against defending fleets, tearing through bulkheads and crew with equal ease. They spearhead planetary assaults, breaking defensive lines through sheer ferocity. They serve as living proof of the power Chaos worship grants, inspiration for traitors and terror for the loyal. The relationship between word-bearers and world-eaters grows strained as the campaign progresses. The 12th Legion fights for the sake of violence, seeking glory through slaughter, caring nothing for the theological significance Lorgar attaches to their actions. The 17th fights for the gods, viewing each battle as sacred act, requiring proper ritual to maximize effectiveness. These differing motivations create friction that threatens campaign cohesion. Argyltal finds himself increasingly drawn to Khan, captain of the World Eaters' 8th Company. The two warriors develop unlikely friendship, bonding over shared experiences despite the fundamental differences between their legions. Khan appreciates Argyltal's straightforward nature, his willingness to speak truth rather than political platitudes. Argyltal recognizes in Khan a purity of purpose he finds lacking in more calculating word-bearers, a commitment to ideals even if those ideals center on violence rather than faith. The friends train together in the fighting pits, aboard the World Eater's flagship Conqueror. These brutal arenas allow warriors to test themselves against one another, honing skills through contests that would kill normal humans. Argyltal holds back his demonic enhancements during these sessions, relying on technique rather than supernatural power, finding the challenge refreshing after campaigns where such restraint seems pointless. Erebus watches this developing friendship with concern. The first chaplain has been manipulating events throughout the heresy, viewing every interaction as opportunity for exploitation. He recognizes that Khan's influence could interfere with plans for both Argyltal and the World Eaters' Legion. The friendship represents liability, connection to values the Chaos Gods ultimately seek to destroy. Erebus begins planning how best to eliminate this problem without revealing his hand. New Syria appears on the campaign route, like destiny manifesting. This is Angron's homeworld, the planet where he fought a slave gladiator before the Emperor's arrival. The 12th Legion's Primarch has never spoken of what transpired here, never explained the bitterness he harbors towards the Emperor. But the word-bearers have researched New Syria's history, understand the trauma that shaped Angron, recognize opportunity in his return to this place of pain. The planetary assault proceeds with particular fury. Angron leads his legion personally, his rage burning hotter than any weapon as he returns to world that enslaved him. The World Eaters fall upon New Syria's defenders with abandon, their battle cry echoing the names of Angron's dead comrades, those gladiators who fought beside him and perished when the Emperor took him from their midst. This is vengeance decades delayed, and the 12th Legion ensures that every drop of blood spilled repays the suffering their Primarch endured. Lorgar has prepared specific ritual for Nuceria, working that will transform Angron in ways parallel to his own ascension to Demon Prince. The Word Bearers establish 8 sites across the planet, repeating the pattern that proved effective at Calth. Dark Apostles conduct synchronized ceremonies, their invocations calling to Khorne, the blood god who has been watching Angron with particular interest since the gladiator pits of his youth. The ritual requires sacrifice on massive scale, blood offering that will attract Khorne's direct attention. The World Eaters provide this without conscious participation, their slaughter of Nuceria's population, generating psychic energy that flows into channels prepared by Word Bearers' sorcery. Every citizen who falls, every defender cut down, every civilian caught in the carnage contributes to working that will culminate in Angron's transformation. The Primarch stands at the ritual center as it reaches crescendo, his body racked by pain as the butcher's nails implanted in his brain decades ago finally reach their inevitable conclusion. These crude augmentations have been driving him toward madness since the Emperor found him. Their crude neurosurgery degrading his transhuman mind in exchange for enhanced aggression. Now they burn out completely. Their archaic technology failing under stresses it was never designed to endure. Angron should die as the nails fail. The damage they have inflicted on his brain is catastrophic, irreversible even by Primarch standards. But Lorgar's ritual provides alternative to death, channel for transformation that will preserve Angron while elevating him to something beyond mortal existence. Khorne reaches through the warp, drawn by the oceans of blood spilled in his name, attracted by this warrior whose existence has been dedicated to slaughter. The change is terrible to witness. Angron's flesh tears and reforms, bone erupting through skin to create structures impossible in natural biology. He grows, his already massive frame expanding to proportions that strain the laws of material reality. His skin darkens to red, the color of arterial blood. His features twist into mask of eternal rage. Wings emerge from his shoulders, demonic appendages that should not function according to standard aerodynamics, but which allow flight through will rather than physics. Angron, the Primarch, dies screaming. Angron, the Demon Prince, is born roaring, his voice carrying across dimensions, announcing to the Immaterium that a new champion has joined Khorne's eternal war. The newly transformed being stands atop the mountain where his comrades once fell, his demonic form visible for hundreds of kilometers, and bellows challenge that shakes Nuceria's very crust. The World Eaters witness their Primarch's ascension, with responses ranging from horror to exultation. Some recognize corruption in what has occurred, see the father they loved subsumed by entity that wears his face. Others embrace the transformation as fulfillment of their legion's destiny, proof that the path they have chosen leads to apotheosis rather than damnation. The 12th Legion fractures along this fault line, though all continue fighting regardless of their internal convictions. Lorgar looks upon what he has accomplished with satisfaction, born from recognition of successful experiment. Angron's transformation demonstrates that Primarchs can ascend to demonhood, that even the Emperor's greatest works can be corrupted and redirected toward the Chaos God's purposes. The knowledge gained here will inform future attempts to elevate other Primarchs, create champions capable of challenging the Emperor himself. The Shadow Crusade continues for months as measured in real space, though temporal distortions created by the Ruin Storm make accurate reckoning impossible. World after world falls before the combined might of the 17th and 12th Legions, their populations slaughtered or enslaved, their infrastructure destroyed or corrupted. The 500 worlds that represented Gilliman's perfect civilization become charnel house, monument to the power of faith twisted toward destruction. But the ruin storm serves additional purpose beyond simply isolating Ultramar. Its presence interferes with warp travel across entire sectors, making even short transits dangerous enterprises. Fleets attempting to reinforce embattled positions find themselves lost in the immaterium, emerging months or years off course if they emerge at all. The storm becomes barrier that prevents loyalist forces from coordinating effective response to the heresy, leaving each system to face traitor onslaught alone. As the campaign nears its conclusion, Erebus makes his move against Argyll Tal. The first chaplain has been setting the stage carefully, planting seeds of suspicion about the Crimson Lord's relationship with Khan, suggesting that such friendship represents weakness that will ultimately betray the word-bearer's cause. He resurrects Cyrene, the blind woman Argyll Tal rescued from Monarchia and grew to love, using her as bait to draw the chapter master into vulnerable position. The confrontation occurs on Nuceria's surface as the Shadow Crusade reaches its culmination. Erebus approaches Argyll Tal with claims of needing assistance, leading him away from other word-bearers on pretext of important discovery. Once isolated, the first chaplain strikes, his Crozius Arcanum smashing into Argyll Tal's chest with force enhanced by ritual preparation and blessed weapons. The blow should be survivable by possessed warrior of Argyll Tal's capabilities, but Erebus has prepared thoroughly, has anointed his weapon with substances designed specifically to disrupt the bond between Space Marine and Demon. Raum is ripped from Argyll Tal's flesh, the entity that has shared his consciousness for years, torn away in explosion of warp energy. The chapter master collapses, his biology failing as daemonic enhancements that have sustained him are suddenly removed. Argyll Tal dies in shadow cast by Aquila, emblazoned on nearby Imperator Titan, the symbol of the Imperium he betrayed framing his final moments. His last thoughts turn to Khan, to the friend who represented uncomplicated honor in universe grown complex with treachery. He dies understanding that Erebus has murdered him not from necessity, but from calculated manipulation, eliminating obstacle to plans that supersede individual lives. Khan discovers the body shortly after, recognizes immediately what has occurred. The World Eater's captain's rage, normally channeled through the butcher's nails into combat fury, transforms into cold purpose. He seeks out Erebus, challenges him to duel, demands satisfaction for the murder of brother warrior who deserved better than assassination. The first chaplain accepts, confident in abilities honed through centuries of combat and sorceress enhancement. The duel between Khan and Erebus will pass into legend, spoken of in whispers by both traitor and loyalist forces. The World Eater's captain fights with skill and ferocity that surprises even Erebus, his grief channeling into precision that overwhelms sorcery and blessed weapons. He takes the first chaplain apart methodically, each blow calculated to cause maximum pain, his vengeance delivered with artistry rare among the 12th Legion. But Erebus survives through intervention of Lorgar, who prevents Khan from delivering killing stroke. The Primarch needs his first chaplain for plans yet to unfold, cannot allow personal vengeance to interfere with strategic necessity. Khan is forced to withdraw. His rage unsatisfied, his friend unavenged, his respect for the word bearers transformed into hatred that will endure throughout the heresy and beyond. The Shadow Crusade ends with Ultramar in ruins and the Ruin Storm fully manifested. The word bearers and world eaters have achieved everything Lorgar intended, crippling the Ultramarines while conducting ritual warfare that strengthens the Chaos Gods. But the cost has been high, measured in both casualties and corruption. The 17th Legion that departed for Calth represented last vestige of the warriors who once built cathedrals. The Legion that returns from the Shadow Crusade consists entirely of fanatics and monsters, their transformation into instruments of chaos complete. The order comes from Horus himself. The traitor legions will muster at Ulanor for the final push toward terror. This is the moment toward which everything has been building. The culmination of years of corruption and rebellion and civil war. The word bearers answer the summons, their fleet departing the ruins of Ultramar to join forces gathering for assault on humanity's throne world. But Lorgar harbors doubts about the War Master's vision. The Primarch of the 17th has watched Horus throughout the heresy, observed how the War Master relates to the Chaos Gods. Horus seeks to use them as tools, channels their power without surrendering to their purposes. He imagines he can win the war, claim the throne, and then control or discard the entities that made victory possible. Lorgar recognizes this as fundamental misunderstanding of what the gods are and what they demand. The word bearers arrive at the mustering point to find the traitor forces in disarray. The various legions have fought their own campaigns during the heresy, developed their own relationships with chaos, emerge changed in ways that interfere with unified command structure. The Emperor's children have descended into excess, seeking sensation rather than military objectives. The World Eaters think only of slaughter, caring nothing for strategy. The Death Guard endure stoically whatever comes, their acceptance of suffering making them difficult to motivate. The Night Lords prosecute terror campaigns for their own sake, uninterested in broader strategic concerns. Only the word bearers maintain doctrinal cohesion, their faith providing structure that transcends individual desires. They fight for the gods rather than personal gratification, wage war as act of worship rather than outlet for dysfunction. This makes them simultaneously more effective than other traitor legions and more disturbing, their organized fanaticism contrasting with the chaotic corruption surrounding them. Lorgar meets with Horus aboard the Vengeful Spirit, attempting to discuss concerns about the War Master's approach to the coming siege. The Primarch of the 17th tries to explain that victory requires more than simply overwhelming terror's defenses, that true success demands embracing the gods completely rather than maintaining pretense of independence. But Horus refuses to listen, convinced that his own genius suffices to overcome any obstacles. The War Master's arrogance has grown throughout the heresy, fed by victories that seem to validate his rebellion. He has crushed loyalist forces, corrupted brother primarchs, brought the Imperium to the brink of collapse. The Chaos Gods have granted power beyond anything the Emperor offered, proven themselves useful allies in his war against their mutual enemy. Why should he fear entities he has successfully exploited throughout the campaign? Lorgar withdraws from the audience, recognizing that words will not persuade the War Master. Actions alone can demonstrate the truth, show Horus that gods cannot be controlled, no matter how much power they grant. The Primarch of the Word-Bearers begins contemplating possibilities, weighing options that could demonstrate divine supremacy without completely undermining traitor war effort. Horus must be taught humility before it is too late, must learn to properly worship rather than merely use. The fleet departs for Terra, this armada of corrupted vessels bearing warriors who once swore to protect humanity. The journey proceeds through warp torn unstable by years of ritual sacrifice and demonic manifestation. Reality bleeds into unreality as ships travel, their Geller field struggling against pressures that sometimes seem almost purposeful, as if the Immaterium itself tests the traitor's worthiness. The word-bearers spend the voyage in prayer and preparation. Dark apostles conduct ceremonies that consecrate weapons and armor, blessing them with gifts of the Chaos Gods. Possessed Marines commune with their demonic partners, aligning material and immaterial components of their beings for maximum combat effectiveness. Cultists train for roles they will play during the siege, preparing to die in service to powers they believe will reward such devotion in afterlife. Terror appears on their sensors like wound in the void, the homeworld of humanity surrounded by defensive arrays that have been reinforced throughout the heresy. The Imperial Palace sprawls across significant portion of the planet's surface. This fortress complex built during the Unification Wars and expanded during the Great Crusade. The Emperor himself resides within those walls, his attention focused on a mysterious project that has consumed him since withdrawing from active command. The siege begins with orbital bombardment that turns Terra's skies to flame. Traitor vessels pour fire onto defensive installations, their weapons punishing shields designed to repel attack from without. But the palace's defenses prove more formidable than anticipated, absorbing punishment that would devastate normal fortifications. Ancient technologies left from the Dark Age of technology or earlier, systems whose principles even the Mechanicum cannot fully explain, hold back the storm of fire with stubborn resilience. The word-bearers receive their objectives during landing operations. They will assault the Sanctum Imperialis, the innermost section of the palace, where the Emperor maintains his throne room. They will conduct rituals at 8 locations surrounding the palace, working that will weaken the Aegis, the psychic barrier the Emperor has erected to protect Terra from demonic incursion. Each ritual requires sacrifice measured in thousands of lives, cultists whose deaths will channel energy necessary to breach defenses that have held for decades. Dark apostles lead these ritualistic assaults, their voices raised in invocation as cultists die around them. The geometry of each ritual site corresponds to points in the warp where the Aegis grows weakest, places where material actions can have immaterial effects. Blood flows into channels carved according to patterns older than human civilization, creating symbols the Chaos Gods recognize and approve. The defenders fight desperately to prevent these rituals from reaching completion. Imperial Fist companies assault word-bearers' positions, their discipline and determination driving them forward despite casualties that would break normal forces. Custodian guards strike at Dark Apostles, recognizing them as linchpins of the enemy effort. Sisters of Silence accompany many assaults, their anti-psychic auras interfering with sorcery that sustains the rituals. But the word-bearers have prepared too thoroughly, have committed too many forces for the defenders to stop all 8 simultaneously. One by one, the rituals reach culmination, their dark apostles completing invocations despite wounds that would kill normal space marines. The psychic backlash as each ritual succeeds kills thousands, their minds unable to process fundamental violations of natural law unfolding around them. The Aegis begins to fail, not all at once but in sections where the rituals punched holes through its structure. Daemons manifest across Terra, creatures of the warp given temporary form in material reality. Greater demons representing all four chaos gods lead lesser entities in tide of horror, their presence transforming the siege's character from military engagement to existential threat. The word-bearers fight alongside these daemonic allies with practiced ease, their years of worship and partnership making cooperation instinctive. They direct the daemon tide toward crucial objectives, channel horror toward targets that will maximize terror and disruption. They serve as bridge between material and immaterial forces, combining transhuman capability with demonic power in ways that create threats loyalists struggle to counter. Through it all, Lorgar searches for his father, seeking the Emperor in the depths of the palace complex. The Primarch has questions that have burned in him since Monarchia, demands for explanation about why faith must be suppressed when gods clearly exist. But he never reaches the throne room, never confronts the being who created and later condemned him. Other concerns intervene, strategic necessities that prevent personal resolution. The siege grinds on for months, Terra's surface scarred by weapons that will leave marks visible from orbit for millennia. The Imperial Palace becomes labyrinth of destruction, its magnificent architecture reduced to rubble, in districts where fighting proves fiercest. Millions die, their lives spent in service to causes they only partially understand, their loyalty to Emperor or Chaos gods mattering less than simple fact of their expendability. Then comes Horus's wounding, the War Master struck down by the Emperor during final confrontation aboard the Vengeful Spirit. The news spreads through traitor ranks like psychic shockwave, momentum of the assault faltering as warriors process implications. Without Horus, the heresy loses its center, its organizing principle, its unified command structure. Lorgar receives the report aboard his flagship, news delivered by Erebus, who has witnessed the duel. The first chaplain describes how the Emperor overwhelmed the War Master despite all enhancements granted by the Chaos Gods, how Horus fell before power that exceeded even divine blessing. The War Master is dead or dying, his rebellion crushed at the moment it seemed about to succeed. The Primarch of the Word-Bearers recognizes that the siege has failed, that terror will not fall to the traitors after all. He orders immediate withdrawal, the 17th Legion pulling back to their vessels, with discipline maintained despite collapsing strategic situation. Around them, other traitor legions descend into panic or rage, some fighting to the last while others flee in disorder. The word-bearers remain organized, their faith providing structure, even in defeat. The retreat from terror proceeds as bloody disaster, loyalist forces pursuing the traitors through the void beyond humanity's homeworld. Entire fleets are annihilated during the withdrawal, their vessels destroyed by defenders who have been granted reprieve they never expected. The word-bearers suffer significant casualties, but maintain formation throughout, their dark apostles conducting rituals that provide cover for the withdrawal while sacrificing rear-guard elements. Lorgar withdraws to the Eye of Terror, recognizing that the material galaxy has become too dangerous for the corrupted legions. The Great Warp Rift offers sanctuary, region where the Chaos God's influence is so strong that loyalist forces dare not pursue. The word bearers will rebuild there, transform defeat into opportunity for deeper transformation, emerge stronger from this crucible. The Primarch's thoughts turn inward as his fleet enters the storm, contemplating lessons learned through rebellion and civil war. Horus was right to challenge the Emperor, but wrong to believe the Chaos Gods could be controlled or used without cost. The heresy failed because the War Master never truly submitted to the powers he claimed to serve, never understood that partnership with divinities requires surrender of autonomy he refused to concede. Lorgar resolves that the word-bearers will not make Horus's mistake. They will worship the Chaos Gods completely, embrace transformation without reservation, become instruments perfected through absolute devotion. The war against the Imperium will continue, but now as true holy crusade rather than rebellion tainted by secular concerns. And perhaps, in time, measured by decades or centuries or millennia, they will return to Terra with faith sufficient to overcome the Emperor's power. The Eye of Terror swallows the fleeing traitor legions, this wound in reality becoming refuge and prison simultaneously. The word-bearers establish their primary base on Sycharis, a demon world that Lorgar claims as the 17th's new home. The planet itself shifts and reforms in response to their presence, its substance responding to beliefs and desires of those who inhabit it. The Primarch retreats into isolation almost immediately upon arrival, withdrawing to the Templum Infitio at the heart of Sycharis's largest city. He seals himself within this structure, forbidding anyone to disturb his meditation, beginning contemplation that will last for thousands of years. Lorgar seeks understanding of why the heresy failed, what lessons the Chaos Gods intended to teach through defeat, how the word bearers can better serve divine purposes in campaigns to come. In his absence, the Legion requires leadership. The Dark Council forms to fill this void. 9 of the most powerful Dark Apostles and Chaos Lords gathering to make decisions that would normally fall to the Primarch. But even this council divides into factions, power centers forming around 2 figures who have guided Lorgar since before the heresy began. Erebus represents one faction, advocating for subtle approach to spreading chaos worship. The first chaplain argues that infiltration and cultural subversion serve the gods more effectively than direct military confrontation. He proposes establishing cults on imperial worlds, planting seeds of corruption that will grow over generations, waiting patiently for investments to yield returns, even if that process takes centuries. His methods prioritize long-term transformation over immediate victory. Cor Ferren leads the opposing faction, favoring more direct approach to the Long War. The Master of the Faith establishes base in the Maelstrom, another warp rift that provides access to different regions of the galaxy. From Galmec, a factory world he claims within the storm, Cor Ferren directs raids against imperial worlds, assaults on strategic targets, campaigns of conquest that expand chaos-controlled territory. His methods emphasize material gains alongside spiritual ones, building power bases that can support sustained operations. These competing approaches create tension that occasionally erupts into open conflict. Proxy wars fought between their supporters, while the principals maintain facade of united purpose. But neither can gain decisive advantage over the other. Their influence too evenly balanced, their positions too entrenched within the Legion's power structure. The stalemate persists across millennia, becoming permanent feature of Word-Bearers' organization. Despite internal divisions, the Word-Bearers maintain remarkable cohesion compared to other traitor legions, where the Emperor's children fragment into warbands pursuing individual obsessions, where the Night Lords descend into piratical chaos. The 17th Legion retains unified command structure and common purpose. Their faith provides glue that holds them together, shared devotion to the Chaos Gods transcending personal ambitions and factional rivalries. This cohesion allows the Word-Bearers to prosecute campaigns other traitor legions cannot sustain. They coordinate multiple simultaneous operations across different sectors, their Dark Council managing complexity that would overwhelm more fragmented organizations. They maintain supply lines and support structures necessary for long-term operations, logistics other traitors ignore in favor of immediate gratification. They plan in terms of decades and centuries, rather than simply seeking next target of opportunity. Their approach to corruption becomes refined through millennia of practice. Dark apostles infiltrate imperial worlds posing as wandering preachers or itinerant scholars, their transhuman nature concealed through sorcery or hidden beneath robes and hoods. They establish cults that disguise chaos worship behind facades compatible with imperial doctrine, teaching corrupted versions of the Emperor's divinity that subtly redirect faith toward the ruinous powers. These cults spread through populations like infections, their teachings appealing to psychological needs the Imperium fails to address. Citizens suffering under oppressive rule find comfort in promises of liberation through chaos. Those seeking meaning in lives reduced to mindless labor discover purpose in service to gods who notice individual devotion. The desperate and broken are offered power through partnership with entities that care nothing for mortal laws or limitations. The Word-Bearers provide these cults with resources that ensure their growth and survival. Weapons smuggled past imperial customs allow cultists to defend themselves against authorities. Forbidden texts provide theological framework for understanding the Chaos Gods. Ritual objects channel warp energies, enabling even baseline humans to work minor sorceries. Support grows incrementally, avoiding patterns that might attract inquisitorial attention, building slowly toward critical mass. Only when corruption has spread beyond containment do the Word-Bearers reveal themselves openly. Their fleets appear in-system as liberators rather than invaders, coming to support rebellions their agents have nurtured over years or decades. Populations greet them as saviors, willingly fighting alongside traitor space marines against loyalist forces attempting to restore imperial control. The Word-Bearers turn military campaigns into evangelical crusades, combining violence with conversion, ensuring that even defeat serves to spread the faith. The Book of Lorgar becomes scripture for the corrupted, this compilation of the Primarch's writings serving as foundation for chaos worship throughout the galaxy. Copies multiply across imperial space, their pages reproducing through both normal printing and warp-tainted manifestation. Each edition varies slightly, adapting to local conditions, but all convey core message. Gods exist beyond the Emperor's narrow truths, and these gods welcome worship from those brave enough to acknowledge reality. The opening lines of the book resonate with particular power. All I ever wanted was the truth. This simple statement captures the yearning that drives countless humans toward chaos. The desire for meaning in universe, the imperial truth, has rendered cold and hostile. The book validates spiritual hunger while providing framework for expressing it, giving form to inchoate desires that otherwise might remain unfocused. Dark apostles preach from the book during ceremonies and rituals, their voices carrying power that transcends normal oratory. They quote passages during battles, bolstering the resolve of cultist allies while striking fear into imperial defenders. They teach selected verses to new converts, building theological understanding that transforms simple corruption into comprehensive worldview. The book becomes weapon as effective as any bolter, instrument for spreading the word, bearer's gospel across the stars. The demon Primarch Angron serves alongside the word bearers in numerous campaigns during the Long War. The ascended former master of the World Eaters maintains relationship with Lorgar's sons, appreciating their organized approach to warfare, even if he cares nothing for their theological concerns. He appears when summoned to lead assaults that require demonic power, his presence turning battles into slaughters, his rage channeled by dark apostles toward objectives that serve the chaos gods. Other demon princes occasionally ally with the word bearers, drawn by opportunities to manifest in material reality. These entities provide capabilities the 17th cannot match through normal means, reality warping powers, and supernatural resilience that turn them into living siege engines. But they remain fundamentally unreliable, subject to whims and desires that supersede military concerns, requiring constant management to prevent them from abandoning operations at crucial moments. The Black Crusades launched by Abaddon the Despoiler provide opportunities for the word bearers to participate in larger campaigns. The War Master of Chaos coordinates traitor forces across multiple legions, directing their combined might toward objectives no single faction could achieve alone. The word bearers contribute significant forces to these crusades, their discipline and organization, making them invaluable assets despite theological differences with the pragmatic Abaddon. But tensions exist even during these cooperative ventures. Abaddon seeks to conquer the Imperium through military force, believing that sufficient power can overcome any defense. The word-bearers understand that true victory requires transforming human civilization at fundamental level, replacing imperial faith with chaos worship, rebuilding culture on foundations that acknowledge the warp's reality. These differing visions create friction that sometimes undermines operational effectiveness. As millennia pass, the word-bearers spread their influence across the galaxy like slow poison. Cults multiply on imperial worlds, their numbers growing as conditions worsen under the Imperium's increasingly sclerotic administration. Rebellions erupt with frequency that stretches imperial military resources beyond breaking point. Chaos, space marines appear where least expected, their raids seeding further corruption, their presence demonstrating the resistance to the Imperium is possible. The Great Rift's formation represents culmination of processes. The word-bearers have been advancing since before the heresy. This galaxy-spanning tear in reality results from accumulated effects of 10,000 years of corruption, ritual sacrifice, and reality-weakening activities conducted by countless cults and traitor forces. Though not solely responsible for the catastrophe, the 17th Legion contributed significantly through their millennia of spreading chaos worship. The galaxy Lorgar envisioned finally begins to take shape, where boundaries between material and immaterial dissolve, where humanity can no longer ignore powers beyond physical existence. Warp storms multiply and intensify, their presence making travel increasingly dangerous and unpredictable. Demons manifest with minimal ritual support, the barrier between realities having grown so permeable that entities slip through almost at will. The Imperium fragments under pressures it cannot contain. And then rumors begin circulating among the traitor legions. Whispers that Lorgar has finally emerged from his 10,000-year meditation, that the demon Primarch walks mortal realms once more. Some claim to have witnessed him leading massive word-bearers' armies, preaching the word of chaos at the head of forces larger than any assembled since the Heresy. Others report visions from dark apostles throughout the Legion, messages from their Gene Father providing guidance for changed circumstances. Whether these accounts represent literal truth or symbolic manifestation of the word, bearers' renewed confidence remains unclear. But their effect on the 17th Legion is undeniable. Dark apostles across the galaxy intensify their efforts, launching campaigns with renewed vigor, spreading the faith with enthusiasm not seen since before the Siege of Terror. The word-bearers move with purpose that suggests coordination from central authority, even if that authority remains hidden from external observation. The Crimson Pilgrimage begins, this renewed crusade that takes advantage of opportunities created by the Great Rift's formation. Word-bearers' fleets emerge from the Eye of Terror and the Maelstrom in greater numbers than witnessed in centuries. Their vessels bearing symbols of the Chaos Gods, openly rather than hiding behind false colors. They strike at worlds throughout Imperium Nihilus, the dark half of the galaxy cut off from Terra by the Rift, establishing footholds in systems suddenly vulnerable due to loss of Imperial coordination. On each conquered world, the word-bearers conduct mass conversions, forcing populations to acknowledge the Chaos Gods or perish. They construct vast monuments to the ruinous powers, edifices that rival anything built during the Great Crusade. They establish temples where cultists can gather for worship, creating permanent institutions dedicated to spreading the faith. They plant seeds that will continue growing long after the Legion has moved to the next target. The Imperium responds with desperation, born from recognition that this represents existential threat. Primaris Space Marines, the new reinforcements created by returned Robot Guilliman, deploy against word-bearers' positions. The Inquisition dedicates significant resources to rooting out cults before they can support traitor invasions. Entire battle fleets receive orders to prioritize word-bearers' threats, recognizing that the 17th Legion's organized approach makes them more dangerous than other traitors. But the word-bearers have been preparing for this moment across 10,000 years. Their networks span thousands of worlds, their cults number in the millions, their dark apostles have perfected techniques for spreading corruption. The Imperium's response, however vigorous, cannot reverse decay that has been accumulating since before most current Imperial citizens were born. The galaxy burns, and the word-bearers ensure the flames spread rather than die. The word-bearers of the current age represent culmination of transformation begun at Monarchia, perfected through millennia of worship and war. These are not simply corrupted space marines whose weak minds fell prey to warp entities. These are true believers, warriors who have spent longer serving the Chaos Gods than they ever served the Emperor, whose faith has been tested and strengthened through 10,000 years of conflict. Their armor bears the patina of ages, ceramite surfaces inscribed with prayers and devotional texts accumulated across countless campaigns. Each word-bearer carries the Book of Lorgar, pages stained with blood of enemies and allies alike, verses memorized through endless repetition during meditations and ceremonies. Their weapons have been blessed by dark apostles in rituals that infuse them with warp energy, making them more effective against both material and demonic targets. The possession that created the Gal Vorbak has spread through the Legion, though in more controlled fashion than the chaotic first attempt. Modern word-bearers include significant numbers of possessed warriors, transhuman bodies hosting demons through partnerships that grant supernatural capabilities. These unions no longer represent desperate gambles but refined processes, compatibility between host and entity ensured through careful preparation and psychological conditioning. Dark apostles serve as the Legion's spiritual and military leaders, combining roles that remain separate in loyalist chapters. These warriors preach the word of chaos with eloquence that can convert entire populations, their oratory skills honed through centuries of practice. They conduct rituals that channel warp energies toward tactical objectives, turning sorcery into force multiplier that enhances conventional capabilities. They interpret the will of the Chaos Gods for their followers, providing divine guidance that informs strategic decisions. Each Dark Apostle commands a host, formation roughly equivalent to a company in size but organized according to spiritual rather than merely tactical principles. The host includes squads of possessed marines, units of cultist auxiliaries, demon engines consecrated to specific chaos gods, and various specialists whose roles blend religious and military functions. Size and composition vary based on the Dark Apostle's particular emphasis and the favor he has earned from the ruinous powers. The Coryphos serves as each host's primary combat commander, warrior, whose tactical expertise complements the Dark Apostle's spiritual authority. This division of responsibilities allows the Dark Apostle to focus on rituals and preaching, while the Coryphos handles moment-to-moment battlefield decisions. The relationship between these two figures defines each host's character, their cooperation or tension shaping how the formation approaches warfare. First, acolytes represent Dark Apostles in training, warriors groomed to eventually inherit hosts of their own. They study under established Dark Apostles, learning the theological knowledge and ritual practices necessary for the role. They lead elements of their master's host in combat, demonstrating capabilities required for independent command. Upon proving themselves worthy, they may be granted their own hosts, assuming spiritual authority over warriors who will follow them across the galaxy. The word bearers maintain forge complexes on worlds they control, facilities that produce weapons and armor independently of Mechanicum oversight. These forges operate according to principles that blend standard technology with warp-tainted techniques, creating equipment that should not function according to natural law, but which proves devastatingly effective. Demon engines emerge from these facilities, war machines powered by entities bound within their structures, armored vehicles that think and hunger and hate. Cultists form crucial component of word-bearers' operations, baseline humans who have embraced chaos worship and received training in military tactics. These mortals serve as expendable infantry that absorbs casualties Space Marines would otherwise suffer, as scouts who infiltrate locations too dangerous for armored warriors, as saboteurs who prepare targets for assault. They fight with fanatical devotion born from genuine faith, viewing their likely deaths as martyrdom rather than waste. The most dedicated cultists receive augmentation that transforms them into something between human and space marine. These blessed warriors possess strength and resilience beyond normal mortals, while remaining more numerous and expendable than full Astartes. They serve as shock troops during assaults, leading charges that overwhelm defensive positions through weight of numbers enhanced by supernatural vigor. Their transformation demonstrates rewards available to faithful servants, inspiring other cultists towards similar dedication. Word-bearers' rituals blend violence with worship in ways that sanctify both. Battles begin with prayers and invocations, dark apostles calling upon the chaos gods to witness the slaughter conducted in their names. Warriors chant hymns as they fight, their voices raised in devotions that echo across battlefields. Victory is celebrated through ceremonies that dedicate captured territory to the ruinous powers, consecrating ground with blood and fire and the screams of the fallen. These ritual practices serve practical purposes beyond simple piety. They generate psychic energy that weakens the barriers between materium and immaterium, making demonic manifestation easier and more reliable. They synchronize the host's actions, creating battlefield coordination that exceeds what normal communication could achieve. They inspire warriors to feats beyond their normal capabilities, pushing transhuman physiology to limits, and sometimes beyond, through force of will channeled through faith. The word-bearer's relationship with demons represents one of their defining characteristics. Where other traitor legions summon these entities as disposable shock troops or view them with suspicion born from awareness of their fundamental alienness, the 17th treats demons as allies and partners. Dark apostles negotiate with greater demons, arranging terms for their manifestation that benefit both parties. Possessed Marines live in constant communion with the entities that share their bodies, their consciousness intermingled in ways that create beings greater than either component alone. This partnership extends to demon engines and other constructs that combine machinery with warp entities. The word-bearers maintain extensive fleets of such vehicles, from helldrakes that streak across battlefields spreading terror to defilers that smash through defensive lines with combination of firepower and demonic strength. These engines respond to prayers as much as control inputs, their machine spirits twisted by the entities inhabiting them into things that hunger for violence and worship both. The Legion's approach to conquest reflects their theological priorities. When word-bearers' forces arrive at a world, they do not simply seek military victory. They intend to transform the planet's entire culture, replacing imperial faith with chaos worship, rebuilding society on foundations that acknowledge the warp's reality. This makes their campaigns longer and more complex than simple smash and grab raids other traitor legions prefer, but also more enduring in their effects. Population centers receive particular attention during word-bearers' occupations. Dark apostles conduct mass conversion ceremonies, forcing citizens to acknowledge the chaos gods or face execution. Temples rise in captured cities, their architecture designed to inspire awe and facilitate rituals. Educational systems are reprogrammed to teach children about the ruinous powers from earliest age, ensuring future generations will worship chaos naturally rather than requiring constant enforcement. Those who resist conversion face fates designed to serve as warnings, public executions transform into sacrificial ceremonies. The condemned deaths, channeling energy toward weakening local reality. Resistant populations are subjected to demonstrations of demonic power, witnessing horrors that break their certainty about the universe's nature. The most stubborn are taken for possession, their bodies offered to demons as hosts, their identities destroyed and replaced by entities that wear their faces while spreading corruption. Yet the word bearers also reward faithful service with genuine benefits. Cultists who prove devoted receive augmentations that enhance their capabilities, elevation from baseline human toward transhuman. Populations that embrace chaos worship find their material conditions improve as the word bearers establish functional governance. The Legion, understanding that starving slaves make poor worshippers, worlds that have served loyally for centuries gain autonomy and resources, becoming centers from which further corruption spreads. This combination of terror and genuine reward creates populations that serve the word bearers from both fear and conviction. Citizens of word bearers, controlled worlds understand that resistance brings only suffering, but also recognize that cooperation offers advancement impossible under imperial rule. They become willing participants in the spread of chaos worship, missionaries who carry the faith to neighboring systems, advocates whose testimony proves more convincing than any forced conversion. The word bearers' enemies in the current age include not just loyalist space marines and imperial forces, but also rival traitor legions whose approaches to chaos differ from the 17th's theological orthodoxy. The Alpha Legion in particular becomes frequent opponent, their subtle methods of corruption clashing with the word bearers' preference for open worship. These interfactional conflicts sometimes prove as bitter as wars against the Imperium. Theological disputes between traitors erupting into violence that benefits neither side. But when circumstances demand cooperation, the word bearers prove capable of working with diverse allies toward common objectives. They participate in Black Crusades despite disagreements with Abaddon's vision, recognizing that large-scale campaigns advance the cause of chaos regardless of theological nuances. They coordinate with other traitor legions during major operations, their organizational capabilities making them natural coordinators for multi-faction efforts. They even ally with Xenos forces when doing so serves the Chaos Gods, their pragmatism overcoming prejudices that limit other Imperial forces. Throughout all these activities, the word bearers maintain their identity as bearers of the word, spreaders of faith, evangelists for powers that offer liberation from the Emperor's lies. They see themselves not as rebels or criminals, but as true servants of genuine divinities, warriors fighting to free humanity from ignorance their Creator has imposed. This conviction gives them resilience that exceeds mere fanaticism, certainty that sustains them through defeats that would break other forces. And always they look toward terror, toward the Imperial Palace where the Emperor maintains his throne. The word bearers remember Monarchia, remember kneeling in ashes while their faith was condemned as crime. They have not forgotten, will never forget, cannot forgive, until the Master of mankind acknowledges what he spent the Great Crusade denying: that gods are real, that they deserve worship, that the truth Lorgar discovered at Cadia represents humanity's destiny rather than its damnation. The Dark Evangelists continue their eternal crusade across a galaxy that burns with the fires they have helped ignite. The Great Rift splits the Imperium, creating conditions the word-bearers have worked toward since before the heresy began. Warp storms rage across sectors where centuries ago only minor disturbances troubled navigation. Demon incursions multiply, their frequency overwhelming even the Inquisition's best efforts at containment. Chaos worship spreads openly on worlds that once considered such practices impossible. This is the galaxy Lorgar envisioned during those desperate years after Monarchia, when faith destroyed sought new objects worthy of devotion. A cosmos where the barriers between material and immaterial no longer hold absolute, where humanity cannot ignore powers beyond physical existence, where the Emperor's secular vision lies shattered beyond any possibility of restoration. The word-bearers look upon this burning galaxy and see not catastrophe, but fulfillment, the natural consequences of truths too long suppressed. Yet challenges remain. The Imperium, though fractured and besieged, refuses to collapse. The Emperor endures upon his throne, his psychic might holding back the worst of the warp's predations, even as his physical body remains locked in eternal stasis. Guilliman has returned, bringing with him new space marines and renewed determination to preserve what remains of their father's realm. The forces of order rally despite every advantage chaos has gained. The word-bearers adapt to these changed circumstances with flexibility born from 10,000 years of experience. They recognize that the long war will continue, that final victory remains distant despite all their successes. But they also understand that every world corrupted, every cultist converted, every daemon summoned represents progress toward ultimate goals. The transformation of human civilization proceeds incrementally, each generation more receptive to chaos than the last. New dark apostles rise to prominence, warriors who have earned the Chaos God's favor through campaigns prosecuted with particular skill or devotion. These leaders demonstrate creativity in spreading the faith, developing techniques that adapt to the Imperium's evolving countermeasures. Some specialize in infiltrating fortress worlds thought secure, establishing cults in places where inquisitorial presence should prevent corruption. Others excel at large-scale ritual warfare, conducting ceremonies that manifest demons in numbers sufficient to overwhelm planetary defenses. The possessed marines of the current age represent pinnacle of the partnership between mortal and demon. These warriors have lived with their warp-bound partners for centuries or even millennia, their consciousness so intermingled that distinguishing between host and entity becomes academic exercise. They serve as champions of the Chaos Gods, living proof that union between man and demon creates something greater than either alone. Their very existence validates the word-bearer's theological position, demonstrates that the boundaries the Emperor sought to maintain were always artificial. Cultist networks continue to proliferate despite imperial efforts at suppression. These organizations operate in shadows of imperial society, hiding among the masses while spreading their corrupted gospel. They recruit from populations that have grown desperate under the Imperium's increasingly harsh rule, offering hope to those who have none. They provide mutual support that allows members to survive in environments that would otherwise crush them, creating communities bound by faith rather than simply fear. The most successful cults grow large enough to challenge local imperial authorities openly, their rebellions drawing word-bearer support that transforms them from nuisances into genuine threats. These uprisings serve as testing grounds for new converts, opportunities to demonstrate devotion through action rather than mere words. Those who survive the initial fighting may be recruited into more formal word-bearers formations, their proven faith earning them advancement beyond what baseline humans normally achieve. The technological capacity the word-bearers maintain allows them to outfit these cultist armies with weapons approaching military grade. Forge complexes produce bolters and lace guns, body armor and heavy weapons, vehicles and artillery pieces, all bear marks of corruption, blessings inscribed into their materials, demonic essences bound into their mechanisms. But they function, often more reliably than equivalent imperial equipment, demonstrating that chaos provides tangible benefits to its servants. The theology the word-bearers preach continues to evolve, adapting to audiences that span from hive-world underdwellers to void-born ship crews, from agri-world farmers to forge-world tech adepts. Dark apostles craft their messages to resonate with specific populations, emphasizing aspects of chaos worship, most likely to appeal to particular demographics. But certain core truths remain constant across all iterations. Gods exist beyond the Emperor. These gods welcome worship, and partnership with them offers power impossible to achieve through loyalty to Corp's throne. The Book of Lorgar exists in countless editions now, each one tailored to its intended readers while maintaining the Primarch's essential message. Some versions emphasize Khorne's martial glory, appealing to warriors and soldiers. Others focus on Tzeentch's promise of forbidden knowledge, attracting scholars and psychers. Still others highlight Nurgle's acceptance of mortality or Slaaneish's liberation from restraint. But all versions begin with those same words. All I ever wanted was the truth. The yearning that drove Lorgar drives countless others who discover his writings. The relationship between the word-bearers and the other traitor legions remains a complex mixture of cooperation and competition. They unite against common enemies, recognize that the Imperium's destruction serves all chaos forces regardless of theological differences. But they also clash over territory and resources, dispute approaches to warfare and worship, maintain rivalries that sometimes explode into open conflict. The word-bearers view themselves as most faithful servants of the Chaos Gods, interpreters of divine will for lesser beings who lack their understanding. This sense of spiritual superiority creates friction even when cooperation proves necessary. During joint operations, word-bearers, dark apostles, attempt to proselytize warriors from other legions, seeking to convert them to proper worship, rather than the half-hearted or misguided approaches many traitors pursue. Such efforts rarely succeed and often offend, but the 17th Legion cannot help themselves. Driven by conviction that spreading the word represents their highest calling. The rumored return of Lorgar adds new dimensions to the word-bearers' activities in the current era. Whether the demon Primarch has truly emerged from his meditation, or simply increased his remote influence over the Legion, the effects are undeniable. Word-bearers' forces coordinate with unprecedented precision, suggesting direction from central authority. Major campaigns proceed according to patterns that reflect Lorgar's known strategic preferences. Dark apostles report visions containing guidance that proves accurate when implemented. Some among the Legion claim to have witnessed their Gene Father directly, encountering Lorgar on battlefields across the galaxy. These accounts describe a being transformed by 10 millennia of communion with the Chaos Gods, a demon primarch whose power exceeds anything the mortal Lorgar possessed. They speak of his presence radiating authority that compels obedience even from entities that acknowledge no master, of his voice carrying harmonics that resonate across dimensions, of his words burning themselves into the consciousness of those who hear them. Others remain skeptical, suggesting that these visions represent either psychological phenomena or deliberate propaganda designed to inspire the faithful. They note that no reliable evidence confirms Lorgar's physical presence, that all accounts come from sources already predisposed toward belief. They question whether the demon primarch has truly emerged or simply allowed certain selected followers to perceive his influence more directly. But whether Lorgar walks among them in flesh or simply guides from afar, the word-bearers proceed with confidence that their cause enjoys divine sanction. They are the bearers of the word, the speakers of truth the Emperor commanded them to suppress, the evangelists who will bring humanity to acknowledge powers it has denied too long. Their faith sustains them through defeats that would shatter other forces, their conviction providing certainty that ultimate victory remains inevitable. The galaxy burns, and the word-bearers ensure the flame spread. They preach in ruins of cities they have helped destroy, their dark apostles proclaiming that from ashes will rise civilization, built on proper foundations. They conduct rituals in captured cathedrals, consecrating spaces once dedicated to the Emperor, to worship of gods who genuinely deserve such devotion. They spread their gospel across millions of worlds, patient in their corruption because they understand the transformation of this scale requires time measured in centuries rather than years. And in the Eye of Terror, in the Templum Inficio, on the daemon world of Sicarus, the form that may or may not be Lorgar continues its meditation, its contemplation of truths that burn brighter than any star. The primarch, who began as a child seeking meaning in the deserts of Colchis, who built cathedrals to a god who rejected his worship, who discovered that the universe contains powers older and greater than even the Emperor, who transformed his legion from loyal servants into instruments of divine will. That being endures, whether in material form or as consciousness distributed across the warp, shaping events through influence that transcends normal causality. The word bearers carry his vision forward, these dark evangelists who will not rest until every human acknowledges the truths they have embraced. They remember Monarchia, remember kneeling in ashes, remember the moment their faith was destroyed and had to be rebuilt on different foundations. They will never forget, will never forgive, will never stop until the galaxy itself kneels before the chaos gods and acknowledges the reality the Emperor spent his existence denying. This is their purpose. This is their mission. This is why they bear the word across the burning galaxy, why they spread corruption and faith with equal fervor, why they serve powers that welcome their worship when their Creator rejected it. They are the first heretics, the legion that turned before all others, the warriors who discovered that gods are real and that reality matters more than any lies the Emperor told. The crusade continues, the faith endures. The word will be spread until the stars themselves go dark and the only light remaining shines from the eyes of the chaos gods, illuminating a universe finally freed from the chains of ignorance. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. And in that eternal war, the word-bearers fight for truths they know to be absolute, carrying their gospel across the void, bearers of the word that will transform humanity or destroy it in the attempt. The word bearers stand as testament to how faith, when broken and redirected, becomes the most dangerous force in existence. They began as humanity's most devoted servants, building monuments to the Emperor's glory, spreading his vision with zealous dedication. But that devotion, when rejected and condemned, transformed into something far more dangerous than simple rebellion. It became genuine worship of powers that welcomed their faith, that responded to devotion with gifts the Emperor would never grant. Theirs is a story of betrayal that cuts both ways. The Emperor betrayed them first, commanding they suppress beliefs he knew to be true, forcing them to deny realities they could perceive directly. But they repaid that betrayal 1,000-fold, corrupting his imperium from within, turning his own sons against him, bringing civil war that shattered everything he built. The question of which betrayal proves greater remains open, though the galaxy pays the price regardless of the answer. Monarchia echoes through all that follows, that perfect city reduced to ash becoming the moment when everything changed. The word-bearers knelt in those ruins and rose transformed, their faith destroyed in ways that made rebuilding it on different foundations inevitable. They discovered that the universe contains gods worthy of worship, powers that offer partnership rather than denial, entities that acknowledge devotion rather than condemning it as ignorance. And now, 10,000 years later, the galaxy burns with fires the word-bearers helped ignite. Their corruption spreads across worlds thought secure. Their cults multiply despite imperial efforts at suppression. Their faith proves more resilient than any material force. They have become what they always were, beneath surface loyalty, true believers who require objects worthy of their devotion, evangelists who will spread their gospel until the last star dies, or humanity acknowledges the truths they serve. The word remains to be spread. The faith endures, unbroken and unbreakable, sustained through millennia of war and transformation. And the bearers of that word continue their eternal crusade. These dark evangelists who know that ultimate victory requires not simply military conquest, but spiritual transformation of human civilization itself. They fight not for territory or glory, but for truth, and in the grim darkness of the far future that makes them more dangerous than any other threat the Imperium faces. For in the end, it is always faith that proves most dangerous. Faith twisted and redirected, faith weaponized and deployed against those who first inspired it, faith that burns brighter than any Prometheum because it answers needs too deep for material satisfaction. The word-bearers understand this, have always understood it, will continue spreading their corrupted gospel until the galaxy itself acknowledges what the Emperor spent his existence denying. That gods are real, that they deserve worship, and that the truth matters more than any lie, no matter how carefully that lie was constructed or how desperately the Imperium clings to its comfortable delusions.